I'm muted. Amateur hour. Welcome to Millennials Are Killing Capitalism and Deculturation. Carlos, good to be with you again. I can't believe it's been 3 months since we did one of these. It doesn't feel like that long, but it's good to be back with you. I think these are fun to do periodically to kind of talk about. First of all, shout out to the work that you're doing consistently. Appreciate what you're doing over there on Deculturation. And yeah, it's fun to get together with you and talk about some of the hot topics or controversial topics or whatever every once in a while, right? Just to like kind of discuss some of these things that are out there in the world and how we think about them. Anyways, good to be with you, man.
No, I appreciate it. And look, I was very honest and upfront when we first started communicating that I would bring down the quality of the show, and that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to bring the smut, the the slob, and all the drama. The thumbnail was hilarious, man. I asked you, I'm like, what controversies? Maybe because I'm just used to the nonsense already. But yeah, it's fun and all. And the thing is, I try my best to be consistent, which I struggle with just because of I'm still working. I still have union obligations, all these things. I actually have a trip coming up, which is like making me pull my hair. So there's quite a bit going on. I need to be more consistent, especially when it comes to putting out edited videos, which I send you the thumbnail of what I'm working on right now, and it's like, I just want to get it out of the way so I could kind of refocus on, I think, more significant videos, specifically on Cesar Chavez, because for whatever reason, I ended up being like one of the few brown voices that is, consistently doing this in the space. So I do feel like a personal responsibility to combat that and address it. But I mean, honestly, the day-to-day stuff is I try to just read, articles that I think are important for people to get, some attention on. I try to do my best to limit the amount of drama and stuff I get into, but these are some of the most prominent, individuals on the online left or that are considered part of the left, broadly speaking. So, you have just amazing academics on here and intellectuals that I think are doing great work and shouldn't be bothered to take out the trash. And I'm more than happy as a blue collar worker to take out the trash. And so that's kind of the way that I've been rationalizing, what I do in the space that I occupy. And if I could push people, towards you or psychic militancy, who, we gotta get something going, because I've been such a fan of just, man, that Why's the Dome TV, who just had an amazing conversation about They Came Before Columbus. Just, people whose work I've been admiring for so long, and learning more about the algorithm in the game, which is, to be honest, is part of the reason why it is kind of important for the growth of my channel to mention these big figures, because it's all connected. It's frustrating that these people aren't getting the attention they deserve, and it's no fault of their own or the quality. It's just the way the algorithm works. And if I can, through my nonsense, push people in that direction of the people I'm a fan of, and I've been very clear about why I don't really watch a lot of their content on my streams, is because I will literally shut up and just absorb the amazing information they're providing or start taking notes. But there's not much I can add to that level of discourse, that level of just detailed analysis that is just, I am so appreciative that exists, and I want to push that. That's what I want people to be feeding on, and I want to be the background noise, if that. But I'm always happy to do these, honestly. And yeah, 3 months it goes by quick, man.
Yeah, it does go by quick. I mean, and I also don't add anything to what my guests that I usually have on here have to say. So I'm with you.
No, but like that Raw Hill conversation, I was like, oh, this dude actually reads the books. I don't know. These don't sound like AI generated prop like questions. So credit to you, man. As a slow reader, credit to you.
Yeah, I mean, I do read the books, and it was funny because I did one with Adam Johnson yesterday from Citations Needed, and which also, like, while they're operating in a different political space, because like what they're doing is always talking about liberal discourse, right? I do really appreciate what the work that they do in like combating different forms of propaganda. And actually, I mean, I just put out a shorter video on it. Um, but I really didn't totally expect and appreciated what he had to say in terms of the shifting narrative of like the kind of DSA aligned candidates. And basically say he was basically like, this is a psyop. Like you know, he's like, these are J Street talking points that are coming out that are designed to reincorporate people who are disaffected by Palestine. But all of this is essentially to buy time for the Democratic Party because they know that they've lost so many folks with their own actions of this last administration, and that there's going to be no accountability whatsoever for people within the Democrats around people who supported genocide or, you know, war crimes or whatever. And I really appreciated him saying that, you know. But
I mean,
I only bring that up because I also read his book, and he was actually shocked. He was like, oh, I don't think anybody that I've talked to has read the book yet, you know. So
yeah, he's like, you're literate? No, which, you know, I didn't know if I was going to bring this up, but the whole thing with Kat on the People's Forum, I mean, that's a big one. And I understand that some people are kind of annoyed of the constant criticism of PSL and PSL affiliated organizations. It's tough because they're coming off like what the DSA pretends to be or claims to be, which isn't what the PSL should actually be. It should be its own independent party, or even the organizations they're involved with should be excluding people like Kat. And I do wonder how much of that is she's white, blonde, and she's Palestinian. So there's a lot of safety around that, around her identity, but her politics, especially internationally speaking, are abhorrent. I mean, to literally come out and say that there's no future where Hamas, you know, maintains any power is unforgivable, man. Like the way that these liberation fighters, these, you know, who are willing to become martyrs are, I mean, when you watch some of these videos, and I've talked about this before, where it's like you realize what an absolute coward you are. You know, the feats of bravery that they're consistently doing, and you know, in the middle of this ongoing genocide, to still disparage them and to still vilify them, because that's what you're doing by saying that there's no future where they maintain control. For me, it's just, again, you're just aiding the propaganda that these are the true bad guys, because nobody's saying that in terms of the government structure of the Zionist entity. They're saying it of Netanyahu, but again, he's not the only one. And I've mentioned how this is so consistent within liberal talking points, whether it's Bernie Sanders having to mention that, having to compare the reactionary Zionists to Hamas to emphasize how bad these reactionaries are, or Sam Cedar saying that he hopes that Ariel Sharon is in hell alongside the entire it's like hilarious, because it's like one person versus the entire leadership of Hamas, right? So I don't know if, like, in his mind that's how evil Ariel Sharon is, or the other direction of like, well, he's the only problem, whereas all the leadership of Hamas is a problem, right? And so I have no doubt in my mind that when Yahya Sinwar was martyred and fought to his literal dying breath, that Sam Cedar was celebrating. And there's plenty of evidence to suggest that he was. And that's not to say that he wouldn't celebrate if Benjamin Netanyahu, if something were to occur to him, but he would be celebrating the fact that hopefully there would be a more competent and more strategic, you know, leader for the Zionist project, not that the Zionist project was going to collapse.
Yeah. I wonder, I mean, I don't know Sam Cedar at all, but I wonder the degree to it, like, depending on what happened to Netanyahu, he might not be celebrating. You know what I mean? Like, if, like,
True.
you might be like, oh, like, you know, like, this is too far. You shouldn't be doing this. Like, but I do not follow these figures as closely as you do. And actually with that, I don't even know her last name, but Kat, the People's Forum thing, like I had never heard of
like that. I don't want to butcher it, but
I had never heard of her before this became a thing online. So I was like, this is where my own, and I'm not saying that's positive. I'm just saying it's like this is how much I don't pay attention to electoral politics, really, which is probably not good or not healthy.
Well, no,
to what you said in terms of what she said, I agree. Those are abhorrent statements, and people shouldn't be, we shouldn't be platforming people that are doing that kind of stuff. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know the context within People's Forum or I know it was a candidate kind of forum and that kind of stuff. And so I don't know, the calculus around it, but certainly those people are right to criticize stuff that they think is wrong for organizations to do, right? So like I don't have an issue with people criticizing that.
Yeah, I was only going to mention that even before, and I was kind of surprised that you mentioned that you hadn't heard of her. Even before her like campaign, she was fairly prominent in terms of her journalistic work, and she got attacked a lot by like white supremacists and these reactionary groups. So she built a lot of credibility. But there's a lot to say about her background and how she came into the scene. Very reminiscent of Alejandra Ocasio-Cortez trying to make it seem like she's just a bartender. Meanwhile, like, doing an internship for Kennedy, things like that. I think Nomiki Konst, who again was a contributor to the Majority Report, helped her early on with her media, like strategy and just the way that she conducts herself in public forums. Nomiki Konst is a Democratic Party like stooge. So I think I might have to double back on, because I kind of just forgot about her and be like, all right, cool. Kat was a failed Democratic Party experiment, right? We're seeing some individuals who are benefiting from being visibly not white that are being embraced, right? And it's again, people wanting to celebrate this historic first, like with Mamdani. Oh, he's a first. Yeah, let's support him, right? That is an angle. Even if he's not the one pushing it, a lot of these kind of guilty, white hipster yuppie types, they want to feel like they're doing something and that they're challenging the system. And that's a big aspect of it. When he's over here saying that he's going to have Zionists throughout the spectrum, meaning the entire spectrum of Zionism, right? He's going to have them in his administration. And it's just unfortunate that we're still dealing with these compradors. And I try to challenge identity politics as much as possible, while at the same time not willing to bend with, these white leftist political commentators who think that it's appropriate to use racially charged phrases or even like racial slurs. There's no need for you to be a bigot, a racist, in order to show solidarity with anyone, with any oppressed group, right? Because for me, this is just an outlet for you, a safe outlet for you. And I think it goes to show that if you have bigotry or resentment towards one group, and your immediate reaction is to use other people's suffering as a shield, then you're going to turn on any one of us at any moment once it's convenient or once you think it's acceptable, and it will be normalized, if not by, the general public, at least the people that follow you.
Yeah, all good. Few comments from the chat too is that Kat said the decolonization of Palestine would be a second Nakba. That's wild. And she also is pro-NATO. So yeah, I mean, sounds terrible.
Yeah, it's this whole narrative of trying to equate the colonizer with the colonized, and it lends itself to continuing to promote this idea that it's basically a nativist idea, right? And the reason I say native is because a lot of people recognize that spew this nonsense is, okay, yeah, they're not indigenous, but they're here now. And, their children were born here, and where are they going to go, this and that. And so it's a nativist thing of like, well, somehow you can become native to the land through occupation, right? And so we have to resist that, this whole idea that where the Zion is going to go, that's not the responsibility or obligation or something that Palestinians should concern themselves about, or it shouldn't even be part of the discourse. All right, you're invaders. We shouldn't be concerned about that. It's the equivalent of saying like, where would Columbus go? Where would Cortez go? Like, what type of nonsense is this? Or like the Polish saying that about the Nazis when they invaded them? Like, where was that question ever raised? Of like, well, if we fight back and resist, where are they going to go? Again, this highlights how we actually do not view Zionists as what they truly are. And consistently, there's markers to demonstrate that, right? I've joked about this before. If I call Nick Fuentes, who's a white supremacist, my primo, right, my cousin, people are going to appropriately like call me out on that, if not completely toss me aside, which they should. But Alejandra Ocasio-Cortez can call Bernie Sanders, a lifelong Zionist, her tío, and we all think it's cute. And so, again, there's consistent evidence, despite people like Hassan Piker saying that if you were ever a Zionist to any degree, you shouldn't be a dog catcher. And he's over here struggling to take off his shirt, to take off a pin, to give to Bernie Sanders in hopes that he'll come over to his house and they'll be able to stream. It's just this pandering to Zionists demonstrates that you actually don't view them for what they are, which is, these white supremacists and, yes, Jewish supremacists, right? I know that's part of the conversation that we wanted to have today.
Well, why don't we jump into that? You can start it off. Because
okay,
also,
yeah, so,
let me just say, like, yeah, there was a whole, I don't even know everything that went down, but there was a little Bill thing. And then I did watch the episode you did with Jared and FD and Lil Bill partially, although he wasn't in it that much, talking about this concept over on, I guess it was on I Mix What I Like, right? It wasn't on. Yeah. And yeah, that was an interesting thing. This is obviously a discussion that I've had and been learning from folks around and, talking to different Palestinians about this concept. And so, yeah, it's not like, I would say prior to, and this is my own just learning and not paying enough attention to things too, prior to October 7th, it wasn't really something that was like that prevalent within my lexicon, and it probably took me a little while to like attune myself to like, okay, well, what do you mean? Like, what are we talking about? Like, let's get a little more specific. But yeah, I'm actually pretty comfortable having conversation around it at this point. So anyways, go ahead and share backdrop that you want to in terms of the discussion.
Yeah, just off that, it's funny because for me, like, and I'm not like the most educated person on this. I'm not, but it's just maybe because of the way I went about learning it. In community college, I had a professor who was Palestinian, and literally, regardless of the course that you're taking, he will take one day to talk about Palestine. And, he ended up becoming a mentor, a close friend, somebody who, when I can get a hold of him, because this was always traveling and stuff, I rely upon. That whole thing with Jubilee, I called him. And I'm like, hey, like, I don't want to overstep. I'm not sure if I should even engage with this and that. And he's known me for years at this point. So he essentially said, like, nobody's going to be an asshole like you. So go do it. And, that was the truth. And I'm like, I can't argue that. Everyone's going to try to be respectful or present themselves in a type of way. And they're going to allow themselves to, allow this individual, this comprador, to control the narrative and to allow him to essentially, and it's gross to say it, but like to pimp out his family that has been exterminated by the Zionist entity. Like, that's how grotesque this individual is. And I'm like, okay, cool. Essentially gave me like the green light to go ahead and do that. But I thought that it was understood that Zionism was like Jewish supremacy for Jewish people. Like, I never thought that was something that needed to be argued. I thought that was understood. I'm like, what do you mean? They're saying, hey, we have the right to colonize land that isn't ours. That is a supremacist mindset. We have the right to dictate the lives and existence of the indigenous population. That is supremacy. Like, so I was kind of shocked, I guess, or maybe I didn't notice that a lot of reactionaries were hyper focusing on Jewish supremacy. So when I did notice that, I was like, oh, once again, because of these rat libs that are afraid to confront Zionism in its, all its layers, we've allowed reactionaries like Jake Shields to own like Jewish supremacy and this and that. So if you call out Zionism as Jewish supremacy, you're immediately affiliated with them, right? I've never argued against using Jewish supremacy. I've only said, like, I don't really like it because I feel like now it's at a point where these individuals will not care about Zionism as long as they don't feel that the U.S. government is being controlled by Zionists, right? The whole Zog thing. The moment that is stripped away, they don't care, right? And it's evident with, again, Jake Shields having a conversation with Nick Cruz, formerly from Fred Hampton Leftist, and then maybe formerly from, was it Revolutionary Blackout Network? And they're talking, and Nick Cruz is like, yeah, you actually support Palestinians, this and that. And then they cut to a commercial break, and it's a T-shirt promoting Rhodesia. And that image of these colonizers that are in those little short shorts and their rifles and stuff before getting their asses kicked. And it's like basically this whole like fight white man, T-shirt. And I'm like, obviously they don't care about Palestinians. Obviously they don't care about indigenous people. Obviously they're not against colonization. They're just so anti-Semitic that they think that the Zionists control the U.S. government and they want to get rid of them, in that sense, in their government. But they don't care if Europeans are colonizing other lands, right? If anything, they'll probably go on vacation there when it becomes safe and comfortable enough. So I do think that we need to acknowledge the fact that we're so, and by we, largely speaking, anyone that claims to be opposed to Zionism and in support of Palestinians, we're still very much hesitant to call these things out for what they are, because we're so hyper-focused and saying, oh, no, we know that Zionism and Judaism are two separate things, right? We know that Zionists have been weaponizing Judaism, for their ends mean. We know that they, most of them were atheists, all these things, right? We know that Herzl was talking about, hey, allow us to be white and the next generation of Jewish children will raise Christian, right? All these things. We know that. But since the establishment of the Zionist entity, the opposite has been being worked, for or towards, I should say. The entire time and continuing today, it's been the objective of making those two things inseparable. And so who the hell are we to waste time to continue to center Judaism and Jews, and argue with what they're telling us? They're literally branding the Star of David on Palestinians, who they're keeping, hostage. Who the hell? Why are we wasting time arguing whether or not this is Jewish supremacy? They want it to be Jewish supremacy. They're proclaiming it to be Jewish supremacy, right? It is Jewish supremacy. Some people have been like criticizing me because I talk about white supremacy. It's a European ideology. How the fuck isn't it white supremacy, right? Within the colonizers, whether black, brown, or white, within colonizers, in their spaces, that's when they enforce white supremacy. Externally, it is Jewish supremacy because they're united in colonizing Palestinian land and just that area in general. I don't think they're ever going to stop even in Greater Israel if they have the opportunity. I think that's just, it's wild to say, but I think that is just their modern position is Greater Israel, right? They want to replicate Manifest Destiny in that entire region. But I'm starting to ramble. The point is that I was kind of shocked that someone like, well, I actually don't know his content, but somebody who has such a prominent position in the online left, like Little Bill, was so loudly ignorant of what Jewish supremacy and Zionism is. I'm so frustrated because like you mentioned, like he was in and out of that conversation. He wasn't there for half of it, and when he was there, it was inconsistent. So it put me in a position where I wish I would have been more aggressive in that conversation. But at the same time, I'm going to respect the space. And my goal is always, all right, what do we agree on? And then we can, argue about the differences. I agree that there are people that are white people, specifically white leftists, that are weaponizing other people's oppression. I agree with that. And we should call that out. However, that is not the primary issue, and that should not be the center of the conversation. And if you're doing almost the opposite by trying to wash off the blood of Palestinians from the hands of Euro-American Jews, then you are promoting, Zionist propaganda. There's no argument there. So we never got to that aspect of the conversation. Literally before he hangs up, I'm about to say, you lied. Like, the majority of Euro-American Jews of your age demographic in your 30s, I believe he's 32, are Zionists. And I'm literally about to say that, drops the call, Dr. Ball agrees with me because it's a fact. And I'm just left over here frustrated because I'm like, if I came into aggressive, it would have been chaos, and maybe the conversation wouldn't have not gone anywhere productive. But then apparently trying to establish an understanding and then moving to the disagreements, if I knew that's the way the conversation was going to go, where he's dropping in and out and he was only going to be there for a very limited amount of time, I would have gone with my first gut instinct. And if you watch, my reaction to his video, I was like, why would I ever waste my time with him? Like, he understands a lot of these individuals have not spoken about the genocide of Palestine. And so for him to speak up and literally say, we're not talking about Palestinians, we're not talking, he literally says, sorry to my Palestinian homies or something like that. We're not talking about you right now. And it's like,
in what context?
Why aren't we? Essentially saying, we're not talking about Palestinians. We're not even talking about Israelis. He wanted to center the conversation on Euro-American Jews, which is why I, in that panel, kept saying Euro-American Jews. And a lot of people have used that against me to say, oh, well, what about these Jews? And what about those Jews? And that, I'm like, no. You don't understand. I'm engaging with his argument. And his argument was he said American Jews, right? So that's why I was specifically hyper-focusing on that, because that's what the conversation was about, or that's what his video was about. And so when he said, we're not talking about Palestinians, we're not even talking about Israelis, we're talking about American Jews, he's still centering, these Zionists, these Jewish supremacists, these white supremacists. And it's like, so all the horror that you've seen, this is the thing that upset you enough to finally talk on it? Because I got a lot of criticism, because I literally got to the point, Jared, where I thought this fool got like in a honeypot position. I'm like, damn, they blackmailed him or something. And then, somebody mentioned his family situation. And immediately the first thing I thought was like, damn, if you're a father, if you're a husband, and you've been watching fathers, husbands, sons, wives see their families get exterminated. We've seen fathers carrying their children in plastic bags of remains. You're seeing that and you say nothing. But because you have a few white leftists that are disingenuous, that are opportunists, suddenly you want to wash the blood of Palestinians off of American Jews who are literally hosting land sales in their synagogues, who are signing up to the IOF, who are lobbying, defending, excusing, and justifying genocide. These are settler colonial outposts. And to not recognize them as such is, this is a form of genocide denial. Because you're trying to deny, the participants, the contributors of what's happening to Palestinians, a genocide. And so, honestly, it's funny because I've seen this video of his maybe now around 7 to 10 times just through editing, from my initial reaction to editing and stuff like that, from preparing to have that conversation. And the more I watch him, the more I get infuriated, because I'm like, I feel like I miss an opportunity to really call out this weird vibe-based Zionist propaganda. And much like I had to reach out and ask, is this appropriate for me to go to debate this Palestinian comprador? And being told, nobody's going to be an asshole like you, do it. Thinking that we're going to be able to have a productive conversation in this sense, or in this environment, and feeling like I got played, bro, because it's like I never got the opportunity to really, hold them to a position. And it was literally like a moving target in the sense of like dropping in and out of the conversation. And maybe this is just me trying to, cope for how that conversation went. But I am truly, truly frustrated, man. And I'm trying so hard with this video that I'm working on to just break it all down, to not censor my feelings about him and how I felt that went down, and just focus on the Zionist propaganda that he was spewing. And how, because I was asking myself, okay, am I making this video about me? And I shouldn't, if it's about combating Zionist propaganda. And I realized, like, no, the importance of this video that I'm trying to work on is to highlight how even claiming that you're ignorant on the subject, if you choose to be ignorant after this time, after every 3 years, then like you've chosen a side. You've chosen a side. And you confirm that you've chosen a side with what you're saying, which is like, again, this weird vibe-based Zionist propaganda. So that's the context and the background behind that conversation. I want to like just put the nail in the coffin for this, because it's really changed the way that I think I'm going to interact with liberals, with radlibs moving forward. We've talked about this privately, and yeah, I'm very, very upset and disappointed at myself. And so, as a good Catholic should. And so moving forward, like, I'm definitely gonna remember not to give these people grace, and remember that they've chosen a side, and that silence means something. Like, these people's silence is more than enough for us to understand who they are, what their mission is, and what their priorities are. So.
Yeah. No, I appreciate all of that. I have a lot of different thoughts sort of circulating through my head, so I don't know how coherent I'm going to be here. But one, first of all, I thought that your engagement was principled, and I didn't think that, like, I certainly didn't think you looked badly in that conversation. And if anything, to me in that discussion, Lil Bill came into it and came out of it looking like he doesn't really know what he's talking about, and he's not thinking about it very seriously. And it's just he kind of just did it. And part of the this is, my memory is not that great, but my recollection of it, and you can correct me if any of this is, you feel like, outside of the bounds of what was actually discussed, was kind of this discussion, and I think FD participated in this too to some degree, of like, we're not going to just let white leftists, deflect white supremacy and say, push this onto Jews, like this kind of thing. And I think that there's a lot. First of all, it's difficult to engage with this level of discourse for me, because I don't know specifically who and what arguments they're even talking about. So that makes it challenging at the front. But you laid out a few things. I mean, one, the right-wing side of things. So let's just deal with that first. So yeah, I mean, I have found interesting, for a lot of reasons, some of the right-wing media over the last couple of years, because of the fact that obviously you would see people. I've never watched Nick, so I can't really comment there. I know that he's just a straight up fascist, so I don't like engage that at all. And that's not to say that, like, I think Tucker or Candace, I mean, they do you same kind of thing. You talk about the commercials. Like, if you watch any of their shows, their commercials are like, hey, here's a plastic gun that you could take into Philly to protect yourself against the hordes of black. Like, this is literally like what they're doing in between. Or like, here's my documentary about how the Chinese Communist Party owns the cartel that operates in Maine. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about, right? Like, so there's all kinds of like super reactionary white supremacists fantasia that's going on within their work that is operating at a level that I don't know if people just see clips sometimes, or if they're like able to somehow turn their brains off at certain points in the argument, or what, right? Like, I don't really get the engagement. Is kind of twofold. I mean, I do think there is the sort of anti-Semitism, Zog, historical white supremacist in a very, and this is where I do appreciate the conversation Rasul Moat and Two Black had with me about white supremacies, white supremacy and white supremacism in a strict sense, right? In terms of it comes out of neo-Nazi KKK style formations, right? That hate Jewish people, right? Are directly anti-Semitic, right? And want them wiped out, right? Would genocide is fine for them, that kind of thing. And so that's there, right? And like that's one animating factor. And I think for certain people on the right, that has a stronger purchase than others. I think there's something else too, though, which in some ways to me, I think is more important in terms of what's going on with that political project, which is I think that, like Adam Johnson said the other day, is these people can read polls too, and they're smart, right? And so they also know on the right that a lot of people are not in favor at all of the policies, of the genocidal, of the support for this thing, right? They see how grotesque it is and they're disaffected by it. And they're like, which political party, if I'm going to vote, is going to give me, am I going to feel like actually cares about this? Right. And that feel part is important because I think on a policy standpoint, even among the most right-wing reactionary, like none of the people are proposing things that are like, hey, like we completely cut off Zionism, we stopped funding them entirely, we stopped giving them, total arms embargo, total trade. Like there's no kind of discourse around that on either party, right? It's like these subtle things of we'll condition certain weapon sales, we'll not do offensive weapons, but do defensive weapons, we'll do like there's all of this maneuvering that's going around the language and the way that this is being modified. But I think like if you talk about like Tucker and Candace specifically, what is their job, right? Their job is to keep people on the right, and so they're like, look, some of us have to go out here and talk to these Christian nationalists and people who are like, what the hell, what is this? And we have to try and just honestly just people, right? Like even getting beyond that, so many people find the genocide just abhorrent, right? And so they are like, well, what, like why am I going to vote for, I mean we saw it with Kamala Harris. Like there is no doubt in my mind the reason that they won't also release this report from the DNC, right, about like what their findings were from that election is they don't want to expose the degree to which people didn't vote for her because she didn't make a clean break on Israel, right? And didn't come out forcefully for like a meaningful even ceasefire, right? So they're trying to absorb, right? They're trying to absorb these people into uh, political base, media based groupings that they can say, okay, when the next election comes, these people are going to tell you vote Republican again, right? And they'll have some kind of messaging some way, but they're building that trust, right? Of saying, I'm going to consistently call this out in certain ways. And it's not the way that you or I would call it out, right? It's not, anti-Zionist in some kind of full sense. It's not pro-Palestinian, certainly. But it is this like, anti-APAC, we don't want them controlling, we shouldn't be, our foreign policy shouldn't be following what the Israelis want us to do. It should be what we see as in our own interest. These kind of discussion points, right? So there's all that. So essentially what I'm saying, and I've said this before, but is that right-wing operation is a media counterinsurgency effort in the same way that liberals engage in those sorts of media counterinsurgency efforts. Is it's like it recognizes that there are political blocks, potential audiences, voters that are disaffected by this, and we have to provide a channel for us to connect with those people so that then when electoral politics come back around, we can still tell them to do the same thing that we've always told them to do, which is vote for whatever. I mean, I don't even know if we're going to vote anymore, to be honest with you. But like, JD Vance, if say in theory there is another presidential election. So that. The other thing is on the Jewish supremacy point. I think that there's like, I don't see how you could make any argument that Israel is not a Jewish supremacist state. Like, it just fundamentally is, right? In the same way that you couldn't make an argument that Rhodesia or apartheid South Africa were white supremacist states. Like, it is what it is. And the context, and like folks like Abdul Jawad Omar have explained this to me very well over the last few years. So but and I always knew, well, not always, but years ago, Palestinians had sort of explained to me the logistics of the sort of apartheid structure. And I know there's issues and debates about whether to even use that term and whether it's too, human rights oriented and all that kind of stuff, right? But understanding, right, that there is this clear hierarchy, and that there are citizens' rights, citizenship rights and abilities to engage in different levels of society, right, that are based around whether you are Jewish or not, and the fact that if you're Jewish, you can just become a citizen of Israel, right? Like, off the top, from anywhere in the world. So, like, I have no issue in that. I think where it becomes a bit problematic, and this might be what they become, maybe where they're focusing their analysis, and it would have been better if it was a little more clear in that context, is that within America, using that term, I think, does somehow, like, if you're talking about the US context, like, if you're talking about Israel, but if you're talking about the context of who is supreme, within the United States, or yeah, I mean, that's actually the best way to put it. Because even within Rasul Muat, and I can't remember who he was quoting here, but he talked about this discussion of, even within white supremacy, we need to have a discussion of which white people are supreme, right? It's not just that everybody, right, on some universalized level has, some equitable level of control and power within this system. But that I think is an important thing to grapple with. And I think when you use it in that context, it can get into this point of like, oh, well, US policy is going this way because actually it's the Jews that are in charge of everything, right? And so I do understand why people get concerned, frustrated about that. On the flip side of that, and I know you mentioned Laith Marouf when we were, planning for this, like, I do think, and we could pivot to this in a bit, to the media discussion, because I know there's some media stuff that we do want to talk about, Hollywood stuff and all that. Like, we don't really have a great analysis on the left of the ways that Zionism has, just controls a lot in terms of media environment, right? And I think this is partly because of the same problem, is people have been uncomfortable talking about this because they think that, oh, I'm being anti-Semitic, or you're being anti-Semitic if you talk about this. But like, when you really just get down to the nuts and bolts of it and look at like who are the organizations, and they're not all Jewish too, which is also what makes this term particularly also a little bit problematic, is like, is it is it, in the U.S. context, are we talking about Jewish supremacy or Zionist supremacy? And is it Zionists or Zio-imperialism? Like, how do we want to discuss this, right? Because, like, are the Ellisons Jewish?
Yeah, I think so.
They are. Okay.
Yeah.
But not
So
all of, like, the most prominent, like,
I get what
funders.
you're saying. I get what you're saying, and I get where you're going. Because I've kind of been receiving a lot of criticism about daring to have nuance, right? Which is like, it's frustrating for me because the reason why I do embrace these detailed and nuanced conversations is, again, because the people that I admire who are covering this have very detailed understanding of these concepts and the structures of settler colonialism. You have to understand it in a detailed manner in order to be able to combat it, right? You have to know your enemy. Trying to simplify everything is just your laziness, and it's actually more of centering yourself than it is centering the struggle against Zionism. You should know its layers. You should know its traps. You should know how it hides and manipulates reality in order to protect itself. Like, that's part of what we're doing here. The reason why it is important to distinguish between, a liberal and a reactionary, despite them both, working for the same objectives, is to understand how liberals manipulate us, right? How they make us feel comfortable. I'm always talking about the pitfalls of liberalism. I mean, I would make every Radlib DSA member, Majority Report fan viewer, Hassan viewer, you name it, read and reread until they have it memorized, the pitfalls of liberalism, because that's important. The same way that it's important to distinguish a liberal Zionist from a rabid, Zionist, because of the way that it's been the liberal Zionists that established and normalized and legitimized the Zionist entity, right? So again, it's all about understanding the strategies, tactics, and methods that these settler colonizers are using. Otherwise, what's your game plan if you don't know your opponent? I don't get. It's so frustrating, man. But when it comes to the fact that we can recognize, or we should be recognizing, the quote unquote deep state, the U.S. military complex involvement in Hollywood and controlling certain scripts and making sure that, hey, if you're going to use, anything related to the U.S. military in your project, we have to approve the script. Why are we pretending, or why are we thinking that it's ridiculous that, the people that are running these companies that are Zionists, whether Jewish or not, will also push back against any criticism of the Zionist project, would also try and push this normalization, this passive normalization of the Zionist entity. Like, of course it's going to happen, right? Because these are their interests. Like, why are we pretending that one is understandable and the other one is ridiculous or preposterous or anti-Semitic? I mean, I'm getting to the point where anti-Semitism needs to go the way of, like, the whole anti-Italian sentiment, right? Because, again, these people don't acknowledge the fact that, yes, within the U.S., within, whiteness, there is anti-Semitism, but that's within whiteness. That's not outside affecting the rest of us, right? Jared Kushner can very easily marry Ivanka Trump, despite Trump probably being an anti-Semitic, anti-Semite, or whatever, because at the end of the day, they have shared interests, right? Whatever his personal sentiments towards Jewish people is secondary towards, their shared interest. So in the same way, when I talk about white supremacy within Zionist circles, right, the Zionist society with amongst themselves, it's the same way that in the U.S., when we talk about anti-Semitism, it's within whiteness, right? If you want to point to, like, obscure, like, hoteps, or I don't even know if there's a specific name for, like, I don't think they're anti-Semitic, like the Chicano nationalists. I haven't really seen a lot of anti-Semitism, because those that are will just straight up be like brown Nazis, which I didn't know that was a thing till I was like out of high school. I was like, oh shit, okay, we have some of those too. Awesome, that's great. Something else to worry about. But my point being is, we need to. I don't know. I'm to the point where, and I'm sure we might disagree on this, right? Um, it is pointless. It's a waste of time to concern ourselves about anti-Semitism. I'm cool with acknowledging and highlighting the opportunists and, you know, the white supremacists that are still within the nuance of saying, well, yeah, we're white, but you're Jewish. Yeah, you know, we're white, but you're Irish. Yeah, like those people, you know, that white on white hatred, like that's cool to study and to kind of parse through things and be more detailed. But in terms of like how we should be conducting ourselves, I don't know how much weight we should actually put upon it, because at the end of the day, the Zionist project is, you know, Euro American or European Jews trying to buy into whiteness, right? They literally are like, okay, send us out here, allow us to colonize, and we will, you know, be your Western stronghold in this region. Like that is how that was a sales pitch for the Zionist project. And so that's what they want. Let's grant it to them. I'm if they want to completely separate, and we'll watch a clip talking about this. If they want to completely separate themselves from Zionism, Judaism, from Zionism, that's their obligation. I think it's a waste of time and effort for us to prioritize and concern ourselves about that when we're not calling out these opportunists, right? Because we have to call out these opportunists, because if they're so fucking racist that they're like, you could be white, but if you're Jewish, if you're so and so, we're going to be against you. How the hell are we going to align with them? And by we, I mean Black, brown, indigenous people, right? We shouldn't feel safe or comfortable around them. If you do, it says a whole lot more about you and your willingness to be seduced by whiteness, right? You see this a lot where, oh, white people are saying it, it must be right. And man, it's so childish and it's so pathetic. I did want to mention a few things. I agree that I think reactionaries are going to push isolationism instead of like anti-Zionism when it comes to the election. I do find it humorous that a lot of these online white leftists got really popular from debating neo-Nazis and white supremacists, but they don't know anything about the actual history of, you know, modern U.S. white supremacist movements, right? So maybe I'm using the word modern wrong, but I'm thinking like 60s Vietnam. I'm not thinking World War II. But it's funny because I literally talked about how, hey, Zog was, you know, popularized after Vietnam. And I got pushed back by this white content creator who was like, dude, literally, like if you were to give sentience to a fedora, this is what this individual would be. All right. And literally says, no, white supremacists wouldn't use Zog. They go way harder than that. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. It was literally the Turner Diaries that popularized Zog following Vietnam. And it's like, it's funny to me how these white content creators don't know their own history. And another responsibility that predominantly falls upon Black people that I'm more than happy to, you know, try and take some, you know, some of that with me is studying and deconstructing white supremacy, right? Not just combating white supremacists for online points, but actually deconstructing their history and how they came to be and how these movements become normalized. For me, it really started from a curiosity of like, damn, these white people can get away with anything. All right. And then it moved to like, damn, like the FBI and the state are usually involved with these, you know, white supremacist militias while at the same time combating them to create new police forces. All right, cool. And then just kind of following those trails of interest of being like, really, how do white people function in within their own settler colonial project? Like, how do they respond and react to each other, right? If you remove us from the equation, which is their dream, what happens to their societies, right? For me, I don't know, maybe it's a sick or unhealthy fascination that I had, but for me, I was like, all right, let's say you have your perfect world. What do you guys do? What do you do with yourselves? Oh, you murder each other. Oh, you find other whites to blame in order to murder each other. All right, cool, awesome. Like for me, that's, if we give you your fantasy world, you're providing me a great like story, right? Which is what it is. So for me, it's humorous that like the most basic things these white leftists don't know. Like how many white leftists that are, you know, positioning themselves as combating white supremacy have actually engaged with white supremacist material and content to study. I mean, come on.
Who are the white leftists, though, Carlos? Like, I don't even know who we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting to the point where I'm like, because I'm usually somebody that likes to name people, but then I realize like they live off this, right? Like I'm still like a real human being. Like I'm still like out here talking with coworkers, doing union work. I'm still like in reality. And so when people like this, whether it's the bad empanadas or the President Sundays, when they talk about, oh, you won't say this to me face to face, and I'm like, bro, I'll fly out to Argentina. I'll make it happen. I'll let you choose what passport I use, the U.S. one or the Mexican one. I'll go out there. I'll show you that I will be more than happy to say what I'm saying to your face. And that's the only thing I don't get a response on. That's the only thing I don't get a response on is like, all right, bro, you're all bark. I get it. This is how like you make a living. Have at it. But I'm here to actually like conflict resolution. I'm a shop steward. Let's find out what the issue is. Let's go. Let's talk about it face to face. And for me, this isn't face to face. This is virtual. Like I said, I'm still a human being. I'm still, moving around in the real world. So for me, face to face is in person. Again, the manifestation of a fedora is President Sunday, who apparently doesn't even know the basics of, the history of white supremacist movements within the U.S. Unfortunately, I had to learn about it for safety, for my own well-being, and to educate, my people in my community about white supremacy. For me, it's not just an online thing; it's a survival thing.
Yeah, well, that's a great point, and I think, I mean, that's what in the conversation with Two Black and Rasul, they say Rasul says the same kind of thing, and interestingly, he talks about also how there's a frustration that's expressed in that conversation about the fact that white supremacy, the term, it more or less no longer refers to like the white supremacists that you are talking about, right? And so his part of their argument is that actually it's become too diffuse in terms of how we talk about it, that which is not to say that that more diffuse thing is not also meaningful. But if you use the exact same term to talk about the sort of overall societal white supremacy, global kind of white supremacy, as you are using to talk about neo-Nazis, skinheads, KKK, etc., that, like you're saying, you lose that specificity also. And I think this is important because, and Rasul makes this point. He's like, or maybe Two Black, one of them, that it doesn't necessarily matter that much, except for sort of two things. One is like, who do I need to be really afraid of? Like, who do I actually need to know that might come after me, right? But also, if you want to fight something, right? So if you're actually interested in fighting white supremacy, right, then if we talk about it in such this big, diffuse, hegemonic notion of it, it almost becomes, it's like talking about capitalism without talking about capitalists, right? Or talking about capitalism without talking about like, okay, what specific corporations do what, and so like if we want to get to the specifics of how to organize or how to fight against things, actually these things do matter, right? They matter significantly, because if I go to, you know, um, a white bake sale, for like some, you know what I mean? I mean, I'm being silly, right? But like there is a difference, right, between a neo-Nazi meeting, right, and some other grouping or organization or set of white people who are doing something else, who may also be really racist or really self-preserving or all of those kinds of things, right? But they're not going to try to kill you at the same time either, and so I think that's like, I appreciated their conversation on that a lot, because I think that specificity, and I think that's where I also did have some frustration within that conversation around how FD and Lil Bill were talking about it a little bit, because it was kind of like we don't need to get into the specifics of it. All that matters is white supremacy. And it's like, well, in what way? Like, how are we talking about this actually? And I think how we talk about it and think about it matters a lot, especially if it's something that we want to defeat, right? I mean, within Zionism, there's a whole bunch of work, great work that's been done. Shout out to the organizers. To give a positive shout out to Italy, since you brought them into this, Carlos. Um, the Palestinian organizers in Italy have been doing phenomenal work, right? And they, along with other groups, PYM groups and other folks, have been mapping out like all of these material flows of weapons, components, parts, what ports do they pass through, who develops them, how many, etc. Right? And they're in Italy, like they've actually got their movement to a point with, the general strike that happened for a couple different times last fall and so on and so forth, that like they have developed enough relationships with, whether it's autonomous workers movements or whether it's like unions or parties that have a more militant past, that they can at least have that conversation, right? Of like, we want to stop this from going through. This is what's coming through your thing. And like, we've got the evidence of that. And that there's a level of sophistication and organizing that I would just say, like, we should aspire to, right? I think so. Yeah.
Just real quick, I'm talking about Italian Americans, man.
I mean, look, historically, Italy has a lot to answer for, whether it's, colonization, whether it's fascism, right? There's plenty. There's also a rich communist history in Italy, right? So it's like this is the contradictions. I mean, I have, you brought up, yeah. I mean, so Irish, so part of my family is Irish, and like my Irish American family is the most reactionary part of my family, like in terms of that, my uncles and my grandfather and all that on that side, like, and I think that I've tried to understand like how did that develop, right? How do you become so pro the US Imperial project? How do you become someone who writes, um, you know, in defense of the Judeo-Christian civilization on the end of your Christmas cards? Like shit like that. Like seriously, like what the fuck, man?
Let me
Um,
read that, bro. Let
uh,
me read that. I need to read that.
um, so and I don't know the answer fully, but there is an interesting history there with Ireland, right? Where a one a lot of the Irish were used as troops within the British Imperial armies historically, right? But also a lot of Irish people left Ireland and became settlers other places and became involved in, and they did a lot of what they did was violence work, right? In service of these imperial projects, right? And we have to be honest about that history, because I also think that same those dynamics can be used with other colonized populations too, and are, and so, I think that's like, we could talk about ICE, we could talk about diversification of police forces and so on and so forth. Like these are intentional efforts used to distance in certain ways, which is sometimes like that's an interesting aspect of white supremacy too, right? Is which white people get to be distanced from the violence to have the privilege to then be able to speak out against it, when actually like you are materially benefiting from the structure that violence produces. So like, and this is actually an argument you will hear from certain pro-military folks and stuff like this. Like I can hear my uncle saying, yeah, it's great, you little commie, like you get to, protest this stuff and talk about this shit online. You can only do that because I fight for your right to do it, you little piece of shit, basically, right? And like, I don't agree with that, of course, but like on a functional level, there is something that you have to reckon with there. Like, you know, I don't, well, I guess what I should say, I don't agree that that should be the thing that stops me from doing it, right? I shouldn't be like, oh, well, yeah, because my uncle fights for my rights. Like, I'm going to stop being critical of something, right? But those are, that's how they rationalize it, and so, yeah, anyway.
They're not wrong in the extent of saying like, no, I want to buy into this. right? Because it's for my benefit. I mean, that's the responsibility and obligation and burden, if you want to phrase it that way. Just the reality of being in the belly of the beast, of being in the Imperial Core, is that, in fact, Hassan Piker came out a while ago saying like, oh, like, people inside the Imperial Core, whether it's soldiers or workers, don't benefit from, capitalism and Western supremacy or whatever the hell he said. And it's like so ridiculous. Like, yes, we do. We're able to do this because we do. We are able to have these products to stream and to have these conversations and be comfortable because we do, right? It wouldn't be the same if we were, outside of it. Maybe for someone like him who grew up, filthy rich, riding, show horses and going to private schools and all these things. His mother had multiple homes around, the world. All these things, fine, sure, cool. Maybe for you, it feels that it's the same coming to the U.S., right? No different. But no, it's a reality that we benefit from that. And there are people that will buy in. It just so happens that because of white supremacy, if you're white or close enough to, appearing white, it's easier for you to get pulled in to benefit from it, right? Whereas there's plenty of black and brown compradors, like you mentioned, ICE, the U.S. military, all these things. There's plenty of them, but they're never going to get fully accepted into whiteness. And so to compensate, they're obviously more atrocious, more horrific, and they do the dirty work, in order to prove to whiteness, like, hey, I will betray not just my people, but anyone that you oppose and point my direction to, right? My anger, my anguish, my resentment, my need for this privilege that is being denied to me and only given to me, like, in certain aspects. But there's a lot of people that want it all, right? They want to be white. Their goal is to be, white person. I always talk about how when it comes to like white feminism or white feminists, their goal is not for, equality. Their goal is to be equal to white men. All right. And so there's always compradors trying to buy into the system, trying to sell out. And it just becomes easier if your pigmentation is closer, to white people. But there's compradors of all colors that want these material benefits, and that's what it is. And so when they say like, hey, you can only yap and argue about the state, and old man shouts out clouds because of me and what I'm doing, and because of Western hegemony and imperialism, and it's like, yeah, you're right, but I'm also still going to oppose it because it's wrong. And if that means that I lose certain privileges or luxuries in my life, then so be it, because we're against it, right? I did want to mention the whole thing of like distinguishing between like different types of white supremacists or like levels to it. I think that's correct, that we are too often too broad. But when it comes to people, especially white people, who are unwilling to acknowledge, racism or white supremacy, if it's not someone burning a cross, then that's kind of when I'm usually a lot broader, because it's like, oh, you're not even comfortable enough to name it. So you're not even at a point where you can distinguish, the layers within it. And I will push back to where saying a little bit, they're not going to kill you, right? These certain white, they're not neo-Nazis, they're not in militias, they still have racist sentiment. Yes, they're not going to proactively kill you, but they're going to passively allow you to die. And if you try to resist, then suddenly they get organized, then suddenly they get political, then suddenly they view this, abhorrent thing of self-defense. So again, it's a very liberal thing, to where as long as their comfort is prioritized, they'll allow things to happen, and they won't proactively participate in the atrocities, but they'll witness them. And once they feel threatened, then they move.
Yeah, they might pick up the phone and call the police too, right? Like, yeah, I mean, it's not, yeah. All right, so where do we want to go next? Do you want to show a clip? We could talk about the media thing, since we kind of brought it up, I guess, and get into it,
Yeah.
get it over with. I will say I'm not really. I'll be honest with people and say I'm not really looking forward to this discussion, this part. But I also, it was my idea to talk about it, so like I have to take accountability of that. You didn't bring it up, but there's been a lot of discussion, like, so first of all, I haven't tracked every element of this discourse. I'm happy if people correct me in the chat if I am out of order on any of this in terms of the way things played out. I'll say a couple things at outset. I like Boots Riley personally. I have had him on Millennials Are Killing Capitalism twice. I appreciate his cultural work, from his music to his films. And well, his one film that's out, the one that's forthcoming, which I do intend to see despite all the contradictions, and we can talk about that. And I'm a Virgo, the series that he had. So it's not a, this is not anything. I'm not going to try to be overly critical. I want to be fair in discussing this. But I do have some disagreements with some of how he has responded to these criticisms, basically, right? So the context of this is that it was pointed out, and I think the first person I saw pointed out, maybe somebody else was pointing it out first. I know that it is something that he has addressed before over the years, so it's not like the first time that anybody has ever said, "Hey, your film was funded by Annapurna," which is, Megan Ellison, which is Larry Ellison's daughter, I believe. Her like boutique film group, which she also has a relationship directly, as I understand it, to like I think they put out Zero Dark 30, or she was a producer on Zero Dark 30. So to give folks a context of the type of insidious imperialist propaganda that she has been associated with, like that's just one example beyond the fact that she comes from an extremely, well, I guess the wealthiest individual Zionist family. So there's that, right? And so and the way I saw Nightjar bring it up, I didn't think was overly combative. She didn't at Boots. Like it wasn't like, hey, like respond to me about this. It was basically something along the lines of like, he got money from Annapurna. They are, they're owned by the Ellisons. Like this is a contradiction. Like how are people grappling with this, or something along those lines? It didn't feel to me like it was like overly some kind of over the top thing. Like he responded, I know, to her and to others for about a day, maybe even more. I know that there's been multiple things, and was quote tweeting. And again, he wasn't added, so that does add the added dimension that it means that like either somebody gave it to him to respond to, or he's searching out on Twitter for the word Boots, or Boots Riley, right? So there's that element of it. And I, first of all, I didn't like the way that the discourse went, because one of the things that I did not like that did happen was there was an association. One, there was this argument that the discussion was astroturfed. And I have to just say, astroturfed by who? Like, you're the one quote tweeting all of these people with your large platform saying what you're saying. Like, so you are putting fuel to the discourse. And this is how the algorithm works, right? Like, then suddenly you log into Twitter and it's like, Boots Riley is criticized. It gets into argument. Like it becomes like a, so there is the kind of how social media does with this stuff, right? Which now we are adding another layer to, and I acknowledge that. And then there's, other folks, Bad Empanada, your best friend, goes and who wants to fly you to Argentina? No, I'm just kidding. Who he does videos. Those are responded. I watched a little bit of one of them. And then he writes a reply to Bad Empanada in the comments, which I don't know whether it was deleted or whatever, but he then reposted that on Twitter so that it would be like preserved. And it was a lengthy reply. And so my big issue, there's a few different things with this, right? And one, the initial reply, along with him saying it was astroturfed and saying that not only was there like anarchist, ultra leftists plus right wingers who were making this critique, so it's like kind of a way of like just being very polemical rather than, okay, let's really have an adult discussion about this, right? And so, as some of the things he says, I'm not a prefigurative anarchist, right? I believe that, in order to get my message out to a large audience, it's necessary to engage with the Hollywood system. Where do you think I'm going to get the money? Essentially, right? All of these corporations, there's no good capitalism, right? And so don't think that there's a kinder, gentler way to do this. And raising contradictions about YouTube, about Patreon, rightfully so, right? Like we're sitting here having a conversation on a platform that is making money from it, that is funneling a bunch of money to Zionists, right? And Google is on the BDS list, to be clear, right? And so this is something we have to also grapple with in this. So there's a lot there that gets sort of thrown out there. And there's a couple of things. One, so Boots has been very consistent on a few things. Like, he has for a long time supported Palestine in a way, and we can talk about that, and we can also talk about some of the ways that we might disagree with what that looks like, right? But he's been advocated in it. He's participated in different things as a filmmaker. He's caught flack from bourgeois press for this. There's been efforts to kind of excise him out of Hollywood for some of this, right? So those are real things that he has to deal with, that I'm sure we see a tiny sliver of what that looks like. There's also this consistent argument that he has made, which is that, in order for our movements to be effective, we need to build a militant labor movement. We need to get a lot of people in unions. We need to get a lot of people in organizations. We need to be able to strike at the point of production. And, that is not sufficient in and of itself. But without that, we are not able materially to affect the flows of capitalism in ways that can change things in the way that we want to. Which I think is whether we agree with every element of that argument and all the work that it's doing, I do think it's a very important argument. I appreciate that he's principled on that, and that he also consistently, you know, gives out solidarity messages and stuff like that to different movements, to workers striking, to people unionizing. He's talked a lot about the increase in unionization, which I don't know that I agree is as significant or substantial as he argues that it is. But also the wave of strikes that we saw, and so on and so forth. So like all I'm saying is his position on that has been consistent historically, and a lot of people don't make that argument too, right? So the fact that he does, and he does it as somebody who's okay calling himself a communist publicly, right? It does mean something, and it meant something to me at different phases of my own radicalization too, to be like, okay, look at this guy. He's on Bill Maher and he's saying I'm a communist, and like, fuck Bill Maher, right? But like, there's this guy up there who's doing that, right? All of that. But on the flip side, there is this issue that I do have, where in this long discussion, particularly in response to Bad Empanada, first of all, let me deal with another point first. So the capitalism point. So I agree with him in terms of there is no sort of ethical capitalism, and all of us, and a lot of us, have relationships with companies and work for companies that we fundamentally disagree with in a lot of ways. And even when I worked for many years in the nonprofit sector, I found those spaces just as infiltrated and full of those dynamics. They were still run by Zionists or capitalists, right? And, certainly capitalists, but in some cases, very Zionist people as well. And so, like, there is a certain level of like, okay, we are all in this and we can't get outside of it. And so there is the need to be honest about that, and to not fetishize or imagine, if I go over here and do my small little thing over here, maybe I can be pure and I can get away from all of this and not be in the messiness of this world, right? And I'm agreeing with him in terms of that's not the right approach. Or it's not any better necessarily. It doesn't make you morally superior or something like that if you do that. The second aspect that we have to deal with, which I think is very real, is that Zionism, frankly, has a really significant hold upon our media landscape, and that it is not, you know, part of what I didn't like about the initial interaction is he really, in the first instance, was not actually dealing with what was brought up, which the issue around Megan Ellison was not that she was a capitalist. It was not that she's a bad person, right? It's not that she profits off the exploitation of people, right? It was that plus the fact that there is a very that even Larry Ellison has stepped in and taken over the company or brought in money at times when she hasn't been able to run it successfully herself, which is a dynamic you see a lot with like billionaires and their kids and stuff like that. Kind of succession, you can get that idea, right? But so there you can't separate these two. I mean, I do understand what he's saying in terms of he makes a point that Megan is not David, nor is she Larry. Okay, like that's fair. They're not all the same. But is she out here saying anything? Is she out here what causes is she giving to? Like, be a little bit more specific about that. You know what I mean? She was involved in making Zero Dark 30. Like, so, like, okay. I do understand. Again, this is that nuance question, right? Of like, okay, well, how much does that matter? But like, look, I get it. And part of his point he was making is it's not the same as making it for Paramount or CBS. They wouldn't put my work out. That's probably true. I mean, CBS and Paramount are just like full, it's just all Zionism all the time, and nothing else. And then cop shows, CIA shows, FBI shows, etc. There's not a lot of class struggle that you find in the Paramount catalog. So that. But again, like initially he wasn't responding really to the Zionism point, which was the crux of what I think Nightjar was bringing up, was like that what are the ideological parameters? What are you sacrificing? What are they imposing in terms of, into your films? And I think this is where also things get very messy, and I don't think that most artists want to talk about this because it's uncomfortable and because they don't want to sound like they sold out or they made sacrifices, or when we don't know that story. So there's that element of it. And Boots is not like, hey, this is the way, he's not engaging in that discussion, which is his right. But at the same time, it's like you fueled this discourse, right? You actually, by responding to it and responding in the way that you did, now you're offering responses, but people are going to want more from you on this. And so I got frustrated by it too, because there was also a bunch of social democrats and like kind of certain elements of Marxists who are just like, see, like the ultra left needs to stop. They're being, this is all anarchism or ultra leftism or these lifestyle politics or whatever else. And look, like part of the big problem, especially once you get into his response to Bad Empanada, is that he says that essentially I'm not breaking BDS. Like he gets into this, right? And he has advocated BAS, right? So again, kudos to him for doing that. He has, that has been one of the things that he has advocated, and I know that within the spaces that he is in, that's not easy to advocate for that. Again, it's also not the highest level, and he would acknowledge that, of like what solidarity or struggle could look like, but it is something. So there's that. With the so with that piece though, so he pulls up the website, right? He shows the companies that are on the BDS different boycott lists. He goes a little bit into how, when you get into the cultural boycott, which is really where this becomes more relevant, I think, in certain ways, that he basically litigates his case through the BDS website, is the way I would argue it, right? And he basically is saying, that the BDS is a specific targeted boycott. It targets specific organizations, and you're not even adhering to that if you're doing videos on YouTube. Which is something I think is worth discussing, and all of that. I mean, I do actually agree with Bad Empanada's point here that effectively YouTube has a monopoly on this type of work. You don't think so? No, we could talk about that. But save that point. So there's that, right? But here's my real issue with all of this is that in all of this, what he is doing is he's providing rationalizations on a very large scale and a big platform that a lot of people who don't like ultra leftists or anarchists or whatever are then going to and saying like, yeah, you all are being too ultra whatever with these demands that Boots is a communist filmmaker. He wants to engage people, get them involved in class struggle, let him cook, basically, right? But this argument then has parameters around a lot of things because we're talking about the wealthiest Zionist family, right? And so if you say that it's fine to be into a direct business relationship with them, a multi-million dollar one, that this is you are in effect normalizing something, and you're providing a rationalization for that normalization. So I think it would have been better. This is sort of my take around it. I think it would have been better if he had just said, I would love it if anti-Zionists would produce and pay. I want to do Hollywood films. I want to do Hollywood films because I have to reach I believe that in order to make a difference in the work that I'm doing, I need to reach a certain level of a mainstream audience. And in order to do that, I need a lot of money, right? And that's essentially what he believes, I think, right? And these were the only people who were willing to give it to me. And he also, to contextualize it a little bit more, he did make this deal in like 2017, 2018 with them, right? So it goes back a ways. It was prior to October 7th, right? And they don't own it anymore, right? They sold it to Neon, which is also owned by a Zionist, by the way. And so but also puts out they put out Parasite, which is a movie I really like. So they put out they have interesting political films that they put out, but the guy who owns it has both US and Israeli citizenship as far as I could gather. So anyway, that's enough for me up front, but I think it would have been better if he had just said, what options do you expect? What do you want me to do here? Like, this is a situation where, I don't agree with these people politically. I say what I say, da 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 da, but there's not really a good non-Zionist. And please, some wealthy anti-Zionist, or at least not vocal, support my work in my movies so that I don't have to continue to work with these people. But that's not sort of the stance that's taken. It becomes a defensive posture and a rationalization. And I think in doing that, like, you're actually broadcasting something that this, normalization is an evolving thing, right? And I think this would be interesting for you to talk about as well, because I know it's something you think about and talk about with other people. I think there's a lot between October 7th, 2023 and to date that was normalized prior to it, that now people are like, wait, should we do that? I don't know if we should do that anymore. And I think like when we come to Nightjar's comment, like that's the thing that I read into it, right? Is like that she's posing a conversation of like, wait, can we talk about this? This seems like a little bit of, should we really still be working with these people when we know so much more now about who they are and what who they are has led to? And so that's kind of it for me. I think that providing a rationalization around that is not something that I can support. Like, I think that we have to name the contradictions that we exist in and be critical of them. But like, I don't actually think there's a benefit to, and I just also like, I feel like this was a totally unforced error. Like by him, I feel like he made it into a big thing when it didn't really have to be that. You know what I mean? Like I don't feel like people were really like it was something that I had to respond to.
Jared, you need some ass breath killers. That's what you need, man. That was. Let's see how much of a Coop fan you really are. Do you remember that track?
What, the coup?
Yeah. Ass breath killer one.
Oh, I don't remember that particular one.
No.
Actually.
All right. Well, that's how most of us first found, Boots Riley through his music.
Yeah, me too. But it was more. Yeah.
Laugh.
Anyway.
Yeah. So, man, I mean, I understand that the position you're in and the reason why you need to provide so much context. And I think that you're trying to be fair. There's plenty that I disagreed with. Most I won't be able to remember, unfortunately. But I didn't want to interrupt because you were in it. So my apologies if I don't address every point or every disagreement. But just broadly speaking, Boots is what, like 55?
Somewhere around
He's
there.
like 55 years old. Homie, what are you doing on Twitter, dog? You're a 55-year-old commie. Why are you like engaging Twitter this way? There's one thing to say, oh, I'm going to tweet out, my upcoming projects. I'm going to engage with fans. But you're 55 and you're getting to Twitter wars. You can't handle criticism. Obviously, you're too thin-skinned to hear even, you mentioned Nightjar, a very principled critique, of these contradictions, right? For me, and we talked about this privately, I'm like, look, it might come off anti-Semitic, but like, who in Hollywood is going to fund his projects that isn't a Zionist, right? Like, who in Hollywood has that kind of money to fund his projects that isn't a Zionist? It's non-existent, right? But this brings the whole argument about, that Mtume talks about a lot, about third cinema. If you're a communist and this is something that you're honest about, and this isn't just a branding exercise, right? Because there's an angle to that as well that you can use in media. Even if you're going to get pushback, you become, the outsider while remaining in the inside, even if there's forces trying to push you out, right? All that creates a certain character, a certain persona that people can gravitate towards that will benefit you, right? And obviously there's a price to pay for that, but still benefit of you being able to maintain that image of yourself for others. For me, it's just kind of like, bro, you're in Hollywood, you're an entertainer. I don't take you seriously as a thought leader, as an organizer, you name it, whatever it is. I don't view you that way. When Sorry to Bother You came out, it's a fun movie. I wouldn't say it's anything more than that. It's a fun movie. Right? People want to say, oh, it's this and it's talking about that. I'm like, sure. Okay. Yeah. All those things are awesome. We could do media studies on it. That's great. Can I put on Sorry to Bother Me and it's going to radicalize people? Absolutely not. If you're not already at least 1 foot in the door, right? If somebody is completely in the dark about organizing and workers' rights, this and that, and you throw on Sorry to Bother You, that's not going to change their lives, right? And if it is, it's such a minimal amount that to say that I need to make a giant Hollywood production in order to, spread my message of communism, of worker, solidarity. I think that's just an excuse. You want the big budget. You want, the glitz and the glamour. You want to walk that red carpet. You want to do that. And that's fine. But just be honest about that. I mean, just say, hey, you know what? Personally, my ideology, I'm a communist. I try to represent that in my work. But, where I'm at in my career and my role as an artist and what I choose to do, I'm willing to compromise my principles in order to get, my work done. It is very much his ego. He could mask it behind, I'm doing this for the greater good. I'm doing this for the international workers of the world. But it's your ego. It's you wanting this level of production to tell your story. And that's fine if you're honest about it, and if you're not trying to paint yourself as something that you're not. In terms of like Bad Empanada, I'll say this again. We went back and forth. It's fun, bro. Like, I enjoy that. I get like annoyed and frustrated like with the Little Bills of the world, right? Like that type of aspect. The Bad Empanada stuff, it's hilarious when somebody is so evidently sheltered in life, because you could always tell how sheltered somebody is in the way that they talk shit. I'm not going to get into the details of how he exposed his mother's relationship with their house pet, but it is what it is. You can look it up. The only thing that he won't respond to when I interact with him is me again willingly say, I will fly to Argentina and have that face-to-face debate conversation that you said I wouldn't have. That's the only thing he doesn't reply to. So for me, that's just evidence that this is for him strictly an online project. The fact that he's trying to minimize and finger wag in order to once again try to minimize and compensate for how he is violating BDS, how he is also living in these contradictions outside of the belly of the beast, right? He's still benefiting from Western imperialism. He's still benefiting from white supremacy. He's literally a colonizer in Australia and now a gentrifier in Argentina. And apparently those Google checks that he's cashing, just like the rest of us, are, it's still seen like he's located in Australia. So he's not even suffering alongside the people of Argentina and dealing with the inflation and just the destruction of that economy, right? So this is like a bougie ass gentrifier, bougie as it gets, right? So I don't take his criticism serious because of the way that he presents it. He makes it personal. And so in that regard, if that's how you want to go about it, then it's fair to call you a hypocrite. If you want to say I'm less of a hypocrite, that's great. But then he goes out of his way because he is so self-conscious about the contradictions that he is willing to participate, excuse, and minimize, that he'll say something like, following BDS is the bare minimum, which you said, right? But he adds, it's like following the Palestinian Authority. How the fuck is following BDS, which is an opposition to the Zionist project, equivalent to following the Palestinian Authority, which are the foot soldiers, the compradors of the Zionist project, right? But again, it's because he doesn't care. He's strictly concerned about defending his image and his character, not the actual substance of anything. And which is something that he tries to throw on others and saying, oh, you're attacking me personally and not my argument. And it's like, well, that's the way that you choose to gain attention, by making it dirty, by getting in the mud. And I'm more than happy because I come out of it. I'm still in it. Shit. So like it's cool. Just in that regard, I don't take him serious because of it. Again, his call for the U.S. colonization of Greenland demonstrates that he doesn't actually oppose colonization, because the people, indigenous people there, the Inuit, have the highest rates of suicide because of the colonization by Denmark. And so for calling for the U.S. colonization of Greenland, you're essentially calling for the genocide of the indigenous Inuit people. But that serves Bad Empanada's rationale, so he excuses it, right? So whatever serves him and whatever he's trying to spew next, he'll justify and rationalize, and his cult will bend over backwards to rationalize it as well. You benefit from, violating BDS just like the rest of us. You're not in the US. You want to feel better. You still benefit from Western imperialism, colonization, gentrification, you name it. So back to the main, issue at hand with Boots Riley. For me, it's just either say that you're legit and engage in third cinema and lead the way, be the vanguard of that, and demonstrate like, hey, I can actually tell my message in a principled manner in Hollywood, so I'm going to do it independently. Even if it means it's going to reach less people, it's going to be more impactful, and you might actually lead some type of cultural revolution if you put that in the forefront. If you put your principles beyond your ego and your artistic vision, because you could lead something greater that is more impactful, that sure, you and your work might not be the ones that get all the praise and all the attention, but you might be influencing other younger artists to go a different path, a principled path, right? And who knows what can come out from that, because you haven't done it, right? To that extent, you already have all these big name connections. You've already proven that your product will be, sold and bought. What more do you need to prove in Hollywood? Because the revolution isn't going to come from one of your films. The revolution is not going to come from, your work with these Zionists. It just isn't. If anything, because of normalization, it might be pushing us backwards, because it's saying, hey, compromise your principles, normalize associating with and working alongside with Zionists, because they're not just funding, right? These are they're tagged as producers, from my understanding, right? So they have more say in what you're doing than what YouTube does. Yeah, producers, than YouTube does for somebody like Bad Empanada. That being said, let's not act like YouTube doesn't force us to, filter and test ourselves. Because if we said what we really need to say, you or I and Bad Empanada would not have a YouTube channel. We would have 3 strikes like that. So we're all being, we're all preserving ourselves to different degrees. We're all censoring ourselves. We're all like curtailing to these capitalist, white supremacists, and Zionist corporations and owners, these capitalists. So let's just be honest about that. But somebody like Boots Riley, who's so talented, who, I mean, look, when it comes to being an artist, it's really hard to transition from one art form to another, right? Or you're going to see a big drop in quality. And I don't think we've seen that from Boots Riley, right? Again, it's weird. This guy's a weirdo, and there's plenty of issues with him. But I know that for a while, when Shia LaBeouf was kind of like pushed out of Hollywood for his nonsense and his, behavior, and there's plenty to say about him. But what I do know is that for a while he was working with a local like theater group out here in LA, and that brought a lot of attention to those individuals in that project because of his name. And this is when he was in the outs, right? When he had already been kicked off to the curb. All I'm saying is, I don't think you need to be down and out on your luck or self-sabotage and be destructive and be held accountable for your actions like Shia LaBeouf. I think you could be principled and say, hey, I did it that way. I demonstrated what I'm capable of doing with the highest budgets, working and compromising with these Zionists. I've made enough money. I have enough recognition. Let's move forward and into something more experimental, something, again, with that third cinema, something that is more challenging and that will reach less people. But at the same time, it's like, will it? With how social media works these days, if it's good enough, people are going to watch it. Now, the question is, are people going to pay for it? But you can make great work from a very low to almost non-existent budget. It's just going to be more difficult. And just say that you're in your career, Boots, he's past that type of struggle. He's normalized a certain level of comfort, certain level of support, certain level of ease, right? That sure might not be as easy as, let's say, like white, liberal, or straight reactionary producers, directors, artists in general. Sure. But at the end of the day, like the whole Bill Maher thing, you're getting invited to Bill Maher for a reason. And it's not because you're an extremist. It's not because you're a radical. It's because you're just spicy enough. And so if that's the lane that you want to occupy, embrace it and be honest. And don't get upset if you're trying to present yourself as more and you get called out. Because you're going to have principled, legitimate critique like he was given by Nightjar. And then you're going to have the opportunist like Bad Empanada that's going to, try and profit off of it while being a hypocrite to a different degree, but a hypocrite nonetheless. And again, to compare BDS to the Palestinian Authority, very reminiscent of Norm Finkelstein calling BDS a cult because it wouldn't recognize the right of the Zionist entity to exist. So you see these parallels with these white people that want to be the main beneficiaries of the Palestinian struggle. But yeah.
A couple of things to add just quickly. One, I don't know the last time he was on Bill Maher, but I do think it was actually the reason that he was on Bill Maher in the time that I remember, and I don't think he's been on again, it was post September 11th, and it was because the original album cover for Party Music, I think it was the Party Music album,
The
was
Twin
the two
Towers, right?
towers being, exploding. And of course, this also was the album cover before September 11th and was supposed to be released, I think, on September 11th or the week after or whatever. And they had to take it off and
Wait,
fold
like
it and replace the album cover.
I
Yeah,
didn't
no,
know
totally.
that.
I mean,
Wait. Look,
totally.
I've watched Loose Change when I was in high school. Why was that not mentioned? Boots Riley was part of the inside job. All right, here's the headline.
No, no,
Boots
no.
Riley works with Mossad
So I don't think
to
that, although people say that, but I do not think that. I think that he just
wait,
made it and
he released it too early. He maybe that's how he got all his
stop,
his
stop,
Zionist connections to
stop, stop.
dude. You
So,
call this
but
you
this
call
is
this episode controversy. Let me give it to you. Nah, just kidding.
oh man.
Go
Now,
ahead.
yeah. Now we're off the rails. But yes, it did have that album cover prior to September 11th. And so this was a big controversy that I think is the reason he was on Bill Maher. It wasn't because Bill Maher was like, oh, like, you know. And Bill Maher in that period actually that was the period he got kicked off of ABC for some of his responses to September 11th. And Bill Maher is an arch reactionary, so I'm not at all like saying anything positive about him. But like, it was a period in which he also got canceled in that kind of moment as well. And it's a funny discussion because Boots is like, I'm a communist, and anyway, that
But I
aside.
mean, Ash
So
had that moment on the BBC or wherever with Piers Morgan. And she's like,
yes,
I'm a fucking
yes,
communist, and then she's
it's
having dinner
similar.
with.
Yeah, it's similar. The other thing I would say just about Boots, to give credit, is that he was part of a communist organization for a number of years. He's done a lot of organizing historically. He's also lived a life where during a lot of his artwork, he was, I mean, by his account, like squatting at certain points, right? So he is not also the same. Like I do want, there were certain things that I'm not at all endorsing Bad Empanada's video or something. There were some of the criticisms that he made in it that I agreed with and a lot that I didn't. He characterized Boots as a millionaire, which I don't know whether that's true or not. He characterized, Boots having received $20 million from Annapurna, which is not true, right? That is empirically not true. That's like $20 million is like the overall budget of his whole movie, and a lot of it came from other producers and so on and so
I
forth.
will interrupt to say this. I think Bad Empanada is probably closer to being a millionaire in Argentina than Boots is to being a millionaire here in the US. And that's something that he does not like to talk about. But he's benefiting from the destruction of Argentina as a fucking gentrifying colonizer.
There you go. So anyways, so I do want to say that because I do think it's important to contextualize Boots as somebody who has been in an organization, advocates people being in organizations, advocates people being parties, unions, etc. The other thing I'll just say quickly, because I think that Boots rejects the third cinema argument that you made. And like, I don't know. I mean, I kind of hope Mtume does write something about it because he shared some reflections on our platform about it. And I know that he thinks about this a lot and he works with a lot of artists and he organizes and he wants to think about ways to do things differently. And actually, what's funny is I went back and re-listened to the last interview I had with Boots. And in it, he actually does kind of advocate that path for other artists of exactly what you said, like make a movie, take it on the road, don't care about how much budget, build your audience, do it street team style, like, and he has had, like with his music, he probably had some history of that kind of stuff too, coming up in the 90s and all of that. But I think his argument, and this is just to make his argument, not to agree with it or disagree, is that again, the work that he's doing when he gets it in as many theaters as possible, which this next movie is about to be in quite a few theaters, is that it reaches more people. And part of the thing that he used in his justification was that he's had a lot of people tell him, like, we played your movie during union drives. We did this. It was helpful. So I know. You go ahead. But I do think that the thing about that too is that when you do create, when you are an artist, you will also get that kind of feedback. I mean, I've received it for this show as well. And I also don't think that you can use that as an excuse to say, like, well, all other contradictions, like, I'm not going to name, discuss, talk about, etc. Um, so I don't know. Yeah, that's
So I'll
all
tell
I
you
would
this.
say.
Yeah. All right. This is what I'm going to do. I don't like to talk in detail what my role is in my union, because I do try my best to, one, not try to oversell what I do, because it's definitely not enough. And there's a lot of contradictions within being in a union in the United States, all these things for sure. I try my best to be there for my fellow workers, and I need to do better. But more importantly, I'm trying to learn about organizing in the inner workings of these types of worker organizations, so that I can provide some type of knowledge or some type of benefit to an actual, radical, maybe even vanguard party or something that I can contribute. That's the way I'm viewing it for me, right? It's I don't really have a lot of talent or skills to speak of, but if I could gain some experience in organizing, the workforce, then maybe when we do have a vanguard party, then I could be a net positive for it in some aspect in any regard, right? So that's how I'm thinking about the work that I do with my union. The role that I'm in, I'm not going to talk about specifically, but I'll tell you this: for you, Jared, for Boots Riley, I'm going to organize a watch party of Sorry to Bother You, and I will have a survey at the end of it. All right. And so this, no. I know it sounds, no. I know it sounds like I'm being petty. This is why you invite me. So let's be honest. But no, because I'm curious now. I really am. And I'm so grateful to my coworkers. Like, they are some of the coolest people. The job that I do is not very glamorous to begin with, right? It's blue collar, but the people that I work with, dude, I have so much love and appreciation for. Um, and I'm so grateful to be around them. Do they have reactionary takes? Absolutely. Are they homophobic, transphobic, machista, sexist? Absolutely. But it's they're real fucking people. They're not these online characters pretending to be something that they're not. They're real people. And they might be all those things, but if you're their coworker, regardless if you are those things, they'll fuck with you just like anyone else. Right? In that break room, we're all good. That being said, like, I'm interested in seeing, because I've had plenty of conversations, I'm honest about my political positions. And so people ask me questions, they give me a hard time. We go back and forth. It's great. It's fun. But now I'm interested that if I do host, and honestly, it'll be to my benefit, because a movie night, dope. Like, people are going to want to actually interact with that. We'll obviously provide food and all that. People are going to want to pull through. It's a black film. Half our union is black, so there we go. There's a lot of factors that will I think will generate to where people will come out and be interested in this. Hopefully more than they are in our union meetings. Which it's tough sometimes. And then, look, I struggle to get to them too, because usually when they're scheduled, I'm working 12-hour shifts. It just is what it is. It's difficult. So I understand that. But if I can organize something like that I think will help people get more involved with the union, but also if I could get some information of how they felt about the film, a little bit of feedback, not just to try and
But I would
sneak one
say
in on Boots,
add
but
one more
just to
step
get
to
feedback.
that.
Yeah.
Add one more step to that, though, Carlos. I think, right?
Mhm.
Which is like there should be some kind of discussion. I think
Yeah.
either before or after, right? Just to also, like, further politicize it and connect it in,
For
right?
sure.
But yeah, like, do your survey. Yeah.
Because
Go
I'm
ahead.
interested now,
Sorry.
because look, I've gotten that too. I've had people tell give me compliments, which makes me uncomfortable, I will block you. If you engage, if you're in my community and you go out and argue on my behalf in other people's community, I've been very honest. Honestly, the joke of the compliment, it's a joke. I won't block you, but I appreciate it. I don't need it. Thank you. Awesome. There's better people out there. Find them. But if you are arguing on my behalf in somebody else's, community that you weren't involved in prior, to watching my content, that's unacceptable. That's parasocial behavior, and you'll be blocked and kicked out of a Discord if you do that. I don't need anyone arguing my positions or defending me in any regard. You're taking away my fun. I love that fucking chaos. So don't do that. I don't mess around with feeding parasocial stuff. Allow me to be online and be better than me in that regard. But yeah, definitely. I think after the survey, definitely have a conversation to kind of, get their raw reactions before I start, preaching of why this film may be beneficial or what its message was. All jokes aside, it was just an idea that I'm interested now to see how people would react.
I think it's a good idea,
kind
right?
of
Like,
apolitical.
yeah, I think it's a good idea. And look, I've seen people saying in the comments, and this is the discussion, right? And I get it, of watch more people to see your thing for what? To do what, right? Like, so that is a reasonable question and frame, I think, to put on any artist who's like, I need making this argument of I need to get it in front of as many people as possible, right? The thing I appreciate about Boots is like, so I just watched some of like social media clips and stuff like that of him, and he's doing premiere stuff and things like this, right? And like he's asked questions like, what should people do who are disaffected right now and this and that, and he's like, join an organization, get involved in class struggle, join a party, form a union. Like, so he's consistent also in taking those moments. And again, to just go back to where we were, I think about the conversation we had, because we had a conversation in December of 2023. And I actually didn't know at the time something that came out through all of this, which is that he had actually done a both sides. He didn't do it on our platform, but like publicly had done I condemn Hamas. I also like both Hamas and Israel are terrorists, is basically what his framing was. And that's really unfortunate. I don't agree with that. And I don't like also that he said something along the lines of like Hamas is a CIA Mossad op to take out the the Arab socialists, and this kind of stuff. And like I really think those are detrimental talking points to put out, especially in that time frame, right? And so I will just say, if I had known that he had said at least one of those comments prior, I think one was after I had him on, but I would not have platformed him in that moment, because I try not to platform people who engage in that kind of rhetoric, period, because I think that it is, even if he's virulently opposed to the genocide, I don't necessarily think that that's enough, right? I don't, in terms of people's politics. Having added that additional caveat, part of our discussion was about how do people do stuff about Palestine? Like, how do people organize in support of Palestine right now and going forward, and so on and so forth? And we did talk a lot about labor in that context, and where labor had gotten, but where labor still wasn't. And so again, like, this is the consistent framing for him of, in order to really make a political impact, including things like stopping a genocide and so on, you have to be able to materially wreak havoc, cause damage, stop things at the way that they're being produced, distributed, and so on and so forth. Otherwise, you're just begging. And he made the point too that by begging, you're also kind of advertising a way of doing politics that is not actually correct, essentially, right? Like, we can all get on these platforms and say, please stop this, or these people are ridiculous, they need to stop this. They're not going to, right? It's they understand what they're doing, right? And we need to be clear about that. So anyway, I've done enough of contextualizing and adding on and all of that. I do think you should do that with that film, and I am very interested genuinely in this film because the new one that's coming out, I Love Boosters, because I also think if you're making these kind of arguments against people, like, it better be good and it better have some revolutionary politics to it, which it probably will. I mean, usually he finds a way to weave that stuff in, but I do think that's also is like fueling this kind of discourse and debate. And I think the frustrating part of it is that then you're putting a lot to ride also on your individual artwork, even if you think that that individual artwork is going to contribute to your union, Carlos, when you screen this, being like, you know what, we need to fucking, go on strike for XYZ, and so anyway, that's all I'm saying. We can move on to something else unless you have anything else to add.
No. I mean, I was gonna say something, but it would reveal a little too much about my job. But yeah, we'll move on.
Where should we go next? What do you want to tee up?
What's your time frame looking at? Your timeline over here? What's your out?
I got at least an hour.
Yeah. Okay. I think we should jump on this.
But we don't have to. But I mean, if you're good for it, then I can.
No. I'm good for it. Because I just don't know how much time I'm going to take up in terms of these couple clips. Because I sent you like 4 or 5 videos. They're all pretty short. The clip section. In fact, the main one I cut down from like 10 minutes to 6 because I was like, oh, I really don't like watching other people's content too much, just because I feel that's not fair to them. But yeah, if you want to pull up the first one that will provide kind of a launching pad to criticize Bad Hasbro, the podcast with Daniel Mattei, the son of Gabor Mattei and brother of Aaron Mattei. I'll be able to criticize Norm Finkelstein. So I think it'll be interesting and give us a better understanding of going back to the conversation about Jewish supremacy.
All right, hang on. I'm just pulling it up real quick.
No worries.
So which one did you want to start with?
The Lathe one.
Okay.
To carry arms. I mean, look, I went to university with Aaron Mattei.
Already?
We both studied at Concordia University. I was the first Arabic person to be elected to any executive of a student union in Canada. I had the misfortune of that happening just weeks before September 11, 2001. Okay, and I became the Zionist media in Canada called me the Osama bin Laden of Canada. Jesus. I was like, inches away of ending up in Guantanamo Bay, but I'm not joking right now. Okay, I it's funny to remember these moments. And after that year, our coalition that was running the student union decided to put Jewish faces on the executive in order to kind of counter this idea. The Zionists were saying there's a cabal of Islamists and leftists that are taking over the student unions. Okay, this is the language that they were using. So we put on Jewish faces on the executive, one of them being Aaron Mattei. Okay, and that pissed off the Zionists so much that the biggest media mogul in Canada at the time, his name was Israel Asper, went and booked Benjamin Netanyahu to come and speak at Concordia University less than a year from September 11th, on September 9th, 2002. And the whole idea of this Israel Asper was that they're going to come and crush the viper's nest. This is the language they used. The viper's nest of anti-Semitism in Canada. The Concordia Student Union being that. And we organized a huge demonstration after we tried to get Netanyahu arrested for war crimes, and the government refused. We went through the court system and so on, and then we issued a citizens arrest warrant, and said we're going to arrest Netanyahu. You know, cutting that story short, Netanyahu was unable to speak at Concordia University, and there was a huge battle between the police and the students. And the police got a beating that they've never had before. And that was the only time in history that a prime minister of the Zionist colony was unable to speak anywhere on this planet as they wished. Okay? This brought a huge Zionist backlash on us. All the national media in Canada was churning 24 hours articles and reports that are disparaging us. And Aaron Matsey, under all this pressure, buckled. Okay, and he broke the line and resigned and went crying to Noam Chomsky. Recorded on video, by the way. He recorded himself driving to MIT from Montreal to cry about the Arabic and Muslim organizers at Concordia, basically bullying him. And he was on this recording that everybody can watch. His father, Gabor Mate, and Noam Chomsky both told him that he doesn't need to listen to the Palestinian Arab and Muslim students, that he should only fall back to his Jewish heritage for making decisions about such a thing, which is, in my opinion, a very supremacist way. Aaron Mate, Max Blumenthal, all these Jewish critics that we're talking about come from the oppressive group, the group that is responsible for the genocides and the colonialism. And therefore, they should be taking their lead, if they really want to criticize their own group, to take their lead from those who are oppressed. We never, we find ourselves as Palestinians in a very unique way in history. When we go and look at, let's say, Black liberation in the United States, when you're going to come and quote right now speakers and writers about it, you're probably going to quote 99 Black writers and then maybe one guy that is white, right? But what is ended up happening is that me as a Palestinian, us as a Palestinians, seem to be, silenced even in our expertise and resistance about our own self. And Jewish voices that claim to be critical but are risking nothing are the ones that are put as experts about our oppression and our liberation. This is very problematic behavior that the US, and I think it kind of betrays that even in the leftist or progressive circles in the West, Jewish supremacy is a norm. When
That's
we
good.
say, Aaron Matsey,
yeah, that was a longer clip. We cut it down. I did just send you something, a message, because I want to show that conversation, or just the interaction. We don't have to listen to the conversation of Aaron Mate and Chomsky, aka Epstein's good friend, which highlights, and for me, I didn't know this because I knew about Aaron Mate's documentary, because he always kind of talked about his time in Democracy Now! And how he came up as a journalist. And I was interested in it. I've never seen it, but I was interested in him because of Gabor Mate, which we'll bring about shortly, because of Gabor Mate's work with trauma and ADHD. It's literally right down my alley. Like that's dope. And then I found out that he was a Zionist, and I was like, man, we can't have anything nice here. But I do want to show this interaction, which explains why Aaron Mate was so defensive of Chomsky when it was revealed that he was, good friends with Jeffrey Epstein. And it wasn't until it was shown to Aaron Mate that Chomsky was literally like coaching or Epstein about allowing the Me Too movement to kind of blow over, to just wait it out, that Arimathea retracted his defense, but even then it was, half-assed. But this explains why he was so devoted to defending Epstein's good friend. Literally driving to it.
I know. Yeah, we're next with you.
You're going to set up?
Yeah.
Okay. Go inside.
I love this guy, man. I love this guy. This is my hero. This is pretty sweet. Has it ever affected you emotionally to be called an anti-Semite, a self-hating Jew? I mean, like, even if intellectually you can, even if it's said, like, if it's said so many times and with such force by seemingly people that may mean well.
I guess probably, maybe 35 years ago it did, but no, I don't care. First of all, this is just what happens when you're critical. I mean, if you shut up, you're okay. Okay, that comes with turf. So what do you expect?
But you've called anti-Arab racism the last form of acceptable racism in the mainstream.
That's been going on for a long time. I mean, when I was a child, and in fact, graduate student, anti-Semitism was legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, anti-Semitism was just normal. I remember as a kid in the 30s when my father finally got enough money to buy a car.
All right. I think we're good there.
Weekend to the.
I'm not big on hearing whites complain about white on white crime. No offense, Jared. No offense. We could talk about how you got bullied at another time. No, but I mean, so the reason why I pulled that up is one, to demonstrate that Laith was being honest, how embarrassing that is to center yourself as a Jewish individual, and as the leader, as the figurehead for this, what should be a larger movement about Palestinians. And so I didn't know about this, or I should have watched that documentary. I would have had this receipt in my pocket. So when he said that, I'm like, nah, I need to find this. And I mean, at the end of the day, while this is why liberal Zionists are so insidious, and why it's important to call them out as liberal Zionists, because of the strategy and tactic, is there you have it saying like, oh, do you feel bad that, other Jews are calling you anti-Semitic, self-hating? Doesn't that hurt your feelings? And then going on to saying like, oh yeah, it's acceptable to be bigoted and racist towards Arabs. Isn't that awful too? And so they mix and blend that conversation to sedate you and normalize the continued censoring of Jews and Jewish feelings. And that's why, like, maybe part of me finds that more interesting to combat, but also it's more prevalent and celebrated, right, by people that claim to be pro-Palestine. I mean, Hassan Piker literally had a conversation with Peter Beinart, like a week ago? Peter Beinart just violated BDS, right? Proactively so. Not like passively, not like compromise. No, like literally was told by Palestinians, do not go to Tel Aviv University. You're claiming that you're no longer the poster boy of liberal Zionism, which was his moniker before. You're saying you're past that. You're saying that the genocide of Palestinians post October 7th has changed you, and you've abandoned any hope of liberal Zionism. All this, right? Flapping of his gums and just trying to sell his new book that again centers Jewish people. You've done all this. Why are you going to go to Tel Aviv? And his argument is, oh well, I need to speak to the Israeli people directly, as if you're going to change anyone's mind in that room. You're not. And more importantly, you're ignoring, dismissing, outright rejecting Palestinians, an organized Palestinian movement, and telling them, nope, I know better than you. And he goes to Tel Aviv University, has that conversation, and then turns right around and says, I'm sorry. Oh, my apologies. I didn't realize what I was doing. Oh, my goodness. Easier to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. But he was denied permission before all that, still did it. And because of whiteness, he's able to turn around and play innocent, play ignorant, right? And so, again, demonstrating that even the most celebrated liberal Zionist is still a Zionist. I mean, Peter Beinart has been on the Majority Report, and Sam Seder and Emma Vigeland praise him and tell people to join his Substack. And so now you have Hassan Piker, the biggest leftist streamer, voice, political commentator, who's being attacked by Republicans. Oh my goodness. He's been denounced by some liberals in the Democratic Party. Oh my god, how awful it must be for that millionaire to go through that. He must be the voice of the left, if that's the case, if those are his enemies. He brags about having government ops. Homie, these are your peers now. What do you mean? So it's comical that a propagandist like that will claim that Zionists of any degree shouldn't even be the local dog catcher. But even after Peter Beinart violates BDS, exposing himself once again as a Zionist, as an opportunist, he's going to have a conversation with him. So all these people are just fraudulent. Again, Bad Empanada, that won't have me down to Argentina, has 3 videos praising Norm Finkelstein. 3 videos praising Norm Finkelstein, never calling out how Norm Finkelstein is a white savior through and through, who has told Palestinians to stop chanting "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," and instead chant "From the river to the sea, Palestinians will be free." And his excuse in the defense is like, oh, well, the other one can be manipulated, and people may, suggest that it's about the genocide of Israelis. It's like, great. It provides you an opportunity to talk about how decolonization and removing the colonizer is not genocide, it's a liberation. Awesome. Why is that an issue? Because they're still going to vilify them as terrorists anyways. That's a given. The reason why he was opposed to that sloganeering is because it promotes decolonization. And he doesn't want that. I mean, the fact that he literally mocked decolonization on stage with Dr. Cornel West, mocked denazification, right? He finds these things ridiculous, preposterous, and identity politics. Like, he dismisses it because he's not actually an anti-Zionist. He's just a hypercritical liberal Zionist. And Peter Beinart is less hypercritical and more brazen with his allegiance to the Zionist project. But at the end of the day, it's both, demonstrate a level of Jewish supremacy. When Laith talks about a problem, in the American left progressive movement of censoring Jewish voices over Palestinians. It was 3-4 years ago that Norm Finkelstein told Dr. Ball in their conversation, what is the value of quoting Palestinians if I know more than them? How is that not a white savior? I don't know if you want to pull up that clip just for the receipt. We've seen it before, but it's just, I think it's important to always allow these people to speak in their own words, because a lot of the supporters of these people, tie themselves in a pretzel to defend what they're clearly saying, especially when it comes to Norm Finkelstein, who has said, I speak slowly because my words mean things. I put value in every word that I say. And so when he says that he's been replaced and displaced by Palestinians because he's not invited on Democracy Now!, because he went to high school with Amy Goodman or whatever the fuck, like, it's a man-child that just wants to be the center of attention.
So I ask you a simple question, Jared. Who would you prefer to be making the case for those who are being unjustifiably persecuted? Would you prefer somebody who has, quote unquote, the right identity, or the person who has the better mastery of the facts? Who would you prefer to be making that case? In my opinion, if your concerns are truly with those who are suffering, then your first priority ought to be making the best possible case. Now, I've noticed, as you probably have noticed, since maybe the late 2000s, I was effectively canceled on the question of the Israel-Palestine conflict. I had invested 40 years to its study. I began in 1982 when Israel invaded Lebanon.
You said it's enough?
I then wrote my doctoral dissertation on the topic. And I then devoted 4 decades, which, as I think you'll agree, is not a trivial amount of time in the life of a human being. And then suddenly, this identity politics emerged on the scene. And notwithstanding having written many books on the subject, and people quite qualified to render judgment, saying that I was the most knowledgeable person in the world on the subject, I was canceled. On places like Democracy Now!, you would never see me again. Instead, you would have these Palestinians, in my opinion, significantly lacking in knowledge of the subject. When I say knowledge, I'm talking about not people speaking about experiences, but people who also claim, Palestinians, who claim to have a scholarly knowledge of the subject. And I was displaced by them.
That's
in
good.
My humble opinion.
I just wanted to get to that point of, again, somebody that emphasizes the significance of words, saying he was replaced and displaced by Palestinians. I mean, you can't get more abhorrent than that. It's just a complete lack of self-awareness, or just centering himself. How is that not a white savior? I don't understand how it. And it's funny because he says, "Oh, I spent 3 decades, this and that. Everyone in the world agrees that I'm the most knowledgeable person, this and that." Never bothered to learn how to speak or read Arabic, or at least I haven't seen him confirm it. I'm reading this, and it's funny because the introduction. Where are we at here? The introduction to this actually talks a lot about Jewish people and what they were going through, and I was like, "Oh, well, I was not expecting that. That's interesting." The Foundation of Zionism by Zabri and Jiris, right? My apologies, and translated by his daughter Fida. Like, the fact that Norm Finkelstein can come out here years ago and say, "Yeah, I know more. Why do I need to quote them? Okay, they have life experience. So what? I can make a better argument." Like, it's just so self-aggrandizing. But again, figures like Norm Finkelstein, even though, yes, he's in the fringe, he's still centered and pushed, right? He's still on Piers Morgan. He's still somebody that people turn to. And it's like, can we be honest that they would rather have even this curmudgeon, socially backward individual like Norm Finkelstein than Palestinians who are actually talking about decolonization? Because Norm Finkelstein, regardless of what he says and does, he's safe because he doesn't advocate for decolonization. And so, I don't know, man. When I watched that clip, there's a whole other. I recommend everyone go watch that conversation with Laid. I mean, any conversation that he has, but there's a whole, front part of that conversation where he talks about the obligation of Jews to resist and to demonstrate that there can be a Jewish John Brown. And it's like there hasn't been one. There is no Jewish Schindler in terms of hiding and protecting Palestinians. There has been no resistance. He talks about there's no Jewish martyr in opposition to the Zionist project. He talks about, it makes amazing points, and it highlights how it's insufficient, going back to the whole conversation about Jewish supremacy and Little Bill and Zionism. Look, if your feelings are so hurt about Jewish supremacy that now you choose to speak on the subject and immediately dismiss Palestinians from the conversation, and you're trying to center these Euro-American Jews, is it enough for them not to be Jewish supremacists? In your categorization, that's wrong. In your definition, that's wrong. Shouldn't they be, anti-Jewish supremacists? Do you not expect white people, and not just not to be racist, but to be anti-racist. And again, it connects to Norm Finkelstein because of the whole Impram Ex Kendi, right? I do think that there's value in saying, hey, it's not enough to not be involved and say, oh, I'm not participating in white and proactively participating and perpetrating white supremacy. I need to see you fight it. And I shared this story before. I'm sorry that, I had a high school friend who was a shark that was willing to get his ass beat by a legit neo-Nazi in high school. Grown-ass man was going to knock our teeth out. But the standard has been set for me from a very young age. And so if you're not in the front lines, if you're not out there putting it on the line, your life on the line, while this is being done in your name, you're claiming that that's not right, you don't get to be neutral on a moving train. You got to be proactively anti-Zionist. You have to be proactively anti-Jewish supremacy. It's that simple. It's not too much to ask when you're benefiting, from Zionism and Jewish supremacy. I don't know if you wanted to watch any other clips or add to that.
No, I mean, I probably could say a couple of things. I mean, and I'm not sure that any of it would be that useful, though. I mean, we talked about Norm the last time, or one of the last times that we did one of these. And so, I think I largely agree with you. I think it's ridiculous, like the way that he makes that, the argument of just, I mean, as you said, doesn't know Arabic. Also, as I understand it, does not know Hebrew, right? So like or is at least not fluent in it, right? And so that's, folks could correct me, but like if you search online and stuff like that, that's discussed many times that he really can't read these languages, right? And so I don't know how you can then pretend that you know more than people who have been reading both their whole lives, right? And have studied. And yeah, and I mean, also there's just so much, it's such a fucking condescending academic kind of thing to do too. It's like there's so many good, like you don't talk about Ghassan Kanafani, like you're not, like there's just no, discussion of a really, really rich history of Palestinian thought, analysis, scholarship on the subject. And also, like, you're not able to actively, like, I don't know what you're doing in the archives. Maybe people are helping you or whatever, but like, anyway. So there's many layers of that. But I also think that the point around the need to center and the frustration when, you can't be the voice is, it is wild. I mean, there's one level of what he's saying, which I think has a modicum of merit, which is that I think that there can be a kind of version of identity politics. Well, there's two things, and we talked about this before. I think one, there's also a Jewish identity politics, and we need to be very clear about that, right? And like, so that is at play in both the discussion that Laith was having, right? And even in sometimes in movements, like, I mean, the way I heard Laith talking about it is like that the decision to have the Jewish leadership was not just the decision of the Jewish folks within it, but it was also like, okay, like we're catching a lot of heat, like let's try this, right? It was sort of the way I interpreted him talking about that. But then that they compromised, right? They didn't hold the Jew, Aaron in particular, he was talking about there. And it's just interesting. I mean, it's like we go through so many different cycles of all of this. And I mean, you can see how that would be. I think the easiest way to talk about it is to make comparisons, is to say like, okay, would we expect that like you're going to have a white scholar of, anti-Black racism, just say, and that they have to be the primary spokesperson, because that's really what he's talking about. He's not even talking about like, can I come on and speak about these things on certain platforms? Like, obviously you do. He's talking about that I want to be the spokesperson for the whole movement, basically, right? So yeah, I mean, there's just a ton of hubris, and I've heard horror stories over the years too about how people who have had to interact with him and stuff like that. In particular,
that's the frustrating part. Like, even removing him, or even not talking about, which we shouldn't, but just briefly not talking about Palestine. He's a fucking asshole. Like, he's an unbearable person. Like, he comes off as just a horrible human being, like as a person, like character, right? Like, to be around. Like, bro, even if you were all the things that you claim to be, people might not still want to like platform you because you're just who you are as a person, right? Which goes to show that, like, hey, like, that matters too on a personal level, how people interact with you, right? And so he gets to go off on Destiny and make a whole mockery of the sham debate. And Ramin has to be composed and prioritize Palestinians and the movement and combat the Zionist propagandas in front of him, because his ego, he's not a narcissist. He's not trying to make it about himself. He's not offended that he has to debate a streamer. He doesn't care. He's there to combat Zionist propaganda. And he put that in the forefront because it affects him personally, because he's prioritizing the Palestinian movement. When it comes to the thing is, like, I was going to kind of include another conversation with Laith that he had with Anan. And I think Anan has the best fucking voice of any, actual, leftist political commentator. Like, just a beautiful fucking voice.
Aside from Dwayne Monroe, right? Like, I mean, that's
right. You're
Dwayne,
right.
Then Adnan, then everybody else.
Yeah, it's such a different. It would very much be like, what vibe am I going for? Anywho, we should have a contest. Yeah, I'm just so jealous. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Those are the two heavy hitters. But he went on this amazing rant. And I have a good friend of mine who his family's from technically Pakistan, but they're from Afghanistan. It's a whole thing, right? And we've had great conversations and about religion and all these things. And I sent him that clip of the conversation that Laith had with Anan, because he went off on atheist, communist, and their dismissal of religion and Islam specifically. And he was right in that, like, whatever my criticisms of religion, he was correct. And there's that clip, I think we played it last time as well, where Norm Finkelstein is talking down, and forgive me because I forget who he was specifically lambasting, but he was saying that, oh yeah, like, he asked him what he read while he was in a Zionist dungeon, and he's like, well, the Quran, of course. And then Norm's like, this guy's not fit to lead. It's just a level of honestly, it's comical. He's like a caricature of a white savior. Shoot, these things are gonna die here. But shoot. No, I think we're good. We're good here.
You good?
Give me one sec.
While he's doing this, make sure, folks, to like, share, subscribe to Deculturation if you are not. Support us on Patreon.
Hold on, Jared. I can't hear you right now. Hold on, brother.
I know. I'm not talking to you, man.
Hold on.
Talking to the audience. All right. Yeah, he can't.
No, I can't hear you. Yeah, it's me.
Yeah, he can't hear. Yeah.
I didn't want to put the cans on. There we go. Yeah. All right. Let me get the hair back. And let me see.
I also don't know who BJG is, so whoever's asking that in the chat, I'm with you. I'm lost too.
Hold on.
Oh,
my bad.
Brianna Joy Gray. I got it.
It should be good.
Can you hear me? No.
Can you say something for me over here?
I am talking, man. You got to go to that audio settings.
This is 100% my fault.
Carlos is boomering out right now. Check 1, 2.
Give me one last attempt here. I wonder why this isn't happening.
Can you hear me now?
1 2 1 2. You can hear me though.
I can hear you. Yeah.
But I can't hear you. Why would it not adjust after the fact? Very unprofessional and embarrassing for me here. Let me hop out and then hop back in and see if that helps. Yeah.
Cool. All right, folks. First of all, thank you for this super chat. I don't know what this is in context for, so we'll get Carlos back on to respond because I don't know anything about LA. Yeah, can you hear me now? Was that Verizon or T-Mobile? I can't remember. Read some chat. So Samantha, thanks for joining us as always. I think the conversation about scapegoating Jewish people leaves out that if we look at these systems, wealthier residential areas, high positions in corporations, Hollywood government, we don't see indigenous people in those spaces. Has that ever worked? I'm gonna make it in the system, not to sell out and reach the masses like Rage at Coachella. Yeah, I'm so conflicted on that point because I love Rage too, and I love Boots, and I love all that stuff, and so, there is that component of it. But I hear you in terms of reaching the masses. Carlos, you back?
I'm back. We could do another 2 hours. No, I'm just kidding. What were you saying? My apologies, man.
Oh, I was just reading through some of the comments.
No.
Actually, somebody had a super chat question that you might know. Do you know what this is? I don't even know what this means. So I understand the fist from LA, but like Sad Hassan for Stayer because #1 viable.
Oh, I didn't know about this, but apparently Hassan Piker is supporting Steyer, the multimillionaire for LA. I mean, he's a Democrat. Like, what are we doing here? Like, he's a Democrat. That's what he is. Like, why are we allowing him to pretend that he's otherwise? Like I said, I have a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory that people like to creep Destiny. You have this the Temu version of Destiny and Hutch. You have a lot of these predominantly white, like liberals that swear that Hassan Piker is a Marxist-Leninist. And it's like, well, I mean, his character is, the kayfabe is that he's, a Marxist-Leninist, but nothing that he does in life. And it's weird because they play both sides. They'll be like, oh yeah, we need to oppose Hassan Piker because he's trying to co-opt the Democratic Party with entryism. But also, he's lying about being a Marxist-Leninist because he lives his life of a capitalist and never wears the same clothes, twice. All these things, refuses to actually use his millions of dollars to, fund third parties or any type of organizations to any meaningful extent. And so they recognize that he's a hypocrite and a liar, but they need him for content. They need to make him a boogeyman for content and to avoid engaging with actual principled socialist, communist, and anarchists. So he serves a great function for a lot of individuals. And last time that I spoke to FD Signifier, and I'm kind of over bringing this up to him because it's not going to change anything. Really disillusioned with liberals. But I view Hassan Piker as the parallel to Tucker Carlson. Right? They both serve the same function of being these essentially like limited hangouts or the fringe of their movements. But at the end of the day, they will still, when it matters most, lead you to either the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. But they'll give you all the, the bells and whistles of why that party has failed you. But at the end of the day, although they might not say go vote for Kamala Harris, they will vote for Kamala Harris in California. They will work alongside the Democratic Party as they commit a genocide. So it really is it's comical that people, it feels like it's a fucking work, man. It makes me feel a little bit crazy, not gonna lie, that it's not evident enough for people to realize that this person is a fucking plant. I mean, he literally worked and bragged about working for Homeland Security through Cicada. Like, what more do you want? He's rubbing elbows with the Democratic Party. He brags about speaking to their consultants. So it's no surprise to me that now he's supporting a millionaire in Steyer. And I don't know if you noticed this, but the move from opposing millionaires to focusing on billionaires is fucking comical. It's hilarious. Because if you oppose millionaires, you inherently oppose billionaires. But if you're solely focused on billionaires, then you're normalizing these millionaires. It's just kind of like, it's okay to be a millionaire. Apparently you're not that exploitative if you only got a few million.
Well, I mean, it's also like, what's the median income of like senators in the United States? You know, I mean, it's just like, you know, we have a country that is run by millionaires at minimum, and obviously they're responsible then to people with more money than them, you know. So yeah, anyway, I don't have a lot of commentary on that other than I agree with your comparison to Tucker. I also think that, you know, historically, people who have played this role are Noam Chomsky or Angela Davis, and like they're, you know, not, you know, I mean, they're getting up there, right, in years and not really effectively able to play that role in the way that they want to, especially with younger generations, right? And so the need for that sheepdogging voice, the one who's going to present you with, you know, I can talk about socialism, I can talk about communism, even I can talk about radical politics and this and that, but like where our energy needs to go is towards this party. And it's actually, I mean, in some ways, I don't want to necessarily split hairs or spend a long time on this, but you know, Angela Davis was always interesting with this because she would advocate for a alternative party structure, except when it was time to vote for president. So it was always like, we need to build this, we need something else, da 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 da. If you listen, you watch her interviews, like in different times, like it always timed up with an election cycle of then, you know, you're going to put that lesser evil argument forward right as the presidential election comes about. His is a little bit different, right? Because it is related in with this DSA, you know, progressive, let's try to take over the party thing. And, you know, his discussion of like, it's a big tent and me being in there is going to push these people out of there. And, you know, all of this kind of stuff. So it does have his new sophisticated spins on that old tired, you know, argument, but it is ultimately, you know, I mean, one thing you could say about the Democratic Party is that in a lot of ways it does function as a party. Like even if we're talking about like radical, like there is a line essentially, and there's like acceptable versions of it, and a certain amount of this, like, okay, well, the way that they would pose it, right, is saying, you know, you have to allow candidates who are in different places to create politics that appeal to their local bases, right? So this was always their argument, for instance, of why you couldn't have like an abortion ban across the party, or you couldn't have like, so it's an argument against certain red lines, but the red lines are absolutely there. It just, they don't talk about them, but they're very clear in terms of where their rhetoric will not go, right? And yeah, like I don't think, you know, Rashida Tlaib is a good example of like, I don't think that she'll be in the party that much longer, just because even though there's plenty to be critical of around her politics, like, you know, she's actually somebody who's willing to say that people who are in the Biden administration should be referred to the ICC for, you know, like you're not hearing that from other folks, and I don't think that it's going to be popular within her party that, you know, she says that even if she has no power to actually make it happen, you know. And so yeah, I don't know. I'm very, very cynical and pessimistic about any kind of Democratic Party entryism with, you know, socialist, quote unquote, or progressive, you know, characteristics, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's who else needs to write or deconstruct why joining a liberal party isn't going to bring about any revolutionary movement or saving grace. I try not to get too pessimistic about the climate, but that's always in the back of my head. Always in the back of my head, man. So, yeah, this is just frustrating. I just wish people were honest about the roles that they play. But again, the role is to be dishonest, right? But yeah, I mean, the whole thing with Mamdani, you know, doing this reading time with Obama, and people celebrating that almost to the same degree that they were celebrating Mamdani being all chummy with Trump. It's like, oh my gosh, Trump let Mamdani call him a fascist. Can you believe it? And it's like just so pathetic to where people believe that Mamdani or Obama's presence with Mamdani means that Obama is realizing that the times are changing. The Democratic Party is going to change. And so, you know, this is a great sign. When it's like, no, it's demonstrating that Obama approves of all the moves that Mamdani has been making because he gave him a call before he even won. And I'm sure he told him what the deal is. If you want my support, these are your restraints, you know, where you're allowed to go and what you're allowed to do. I wouldn't be surprised if one of those was maintaining Tish as the police commissioner. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a whole lot of things that were said like, hey, you can flap your gums, you could do this and that, but just make sure you know where how far your leash goes. And I think his reward was that story time with Obama. He already won. What does he need Obama for? It makes no sense. Of course, unless you're trying to sell yourself to liberals as the future of the party. But all these people from like Mike from PA, from Kyle Kalinske, are promoting a new deal, right? And it's like they don't recognize or acknowledge the fact that FDR and the New Deal was meant to save capitalism. So what they're asking for is to save capitalism again, to revive the American dream of owning a home and all this shit that requires the exploitation of the rest of the world and the destruction of the rest of the world. Like that's what you're asking for. That's really what you're calling for. And we normalize those ideas and when we yearn for them, we're not realizing that like, no, wait. This is exactly what defanged radical movements, whether socialists, communists, or anarchists. We should be opposed to this, to these lifelines for capitalism. But again, it's for their comfort. So that was
no, it's a very good point, and it's one of the really significant contradictions in the Imperial core that I still like constantly grapple with, and am in dialogue with people. It comes up a lot in our study groups. Certainly it came up when we read Ali Qadri's Accumulation of Waste, because he's just like, look, all you fools, not fools, but he's like, all you people in the Imperial core, you know, he's like, the system, you benefit from the system, whether you like it or not. And the system is violence upon the third world. And that is actually where the money comes from for it. It is actually how it, what's the word I want? Reproduces itself, right? And you know that like, and this is the tension, right? Also between what Boots Riley is talking about when he's talking about class struggle. Is it then also becomes class struggle for what? Right? Like I do think that this is also really important. And I know he and I, when we talked, we had a good discussion about it. And he did talk about, you know, within strikes and within certain stuff he was seeing, solidarity that was coming out of them rather than just strictly for. So he understands the difference, right, between what historically we would call a trade union consciousness, right, which is, you want to better your working conditions, you want more benefits, you want more pay. That consciousness, especially in the imperial core, it is not a revolutionary consciousness. It's ultimately it benefits you, and in this system, that means that you get a share of the spoils of the imperialist system, right? And so you're fighting for that, and there is a real difference, and it's a very difficult bridge to cross between I'm going to fight for myself and I'm going to lay something on the line for somebody else. And I do still believe that organization is always necessary. I do believe that organized workplaces are still a incredible and really important lever in being able to even use Gaza, for example. We don't want the bombs to get there, right? Like, port workers have to be organized to stop that, or distribution centers, or truckers, or whatever, right? So like, that is just an objective reality that we have to reckon with, that having sectors organized would be a way to potentially do that, but that is also just a potential, right? And it doesn't transform into we're actually going to do this stuff for other people without people having revolutionary politics and having some idea of solidarity and the importance of that, but also some analysis, which is also missing a lot of times. And it's difficult to do this work, but this is where organizations and parties become really important. Of, okay, well, how the hell are we transition? Like, what is our vision, right, for getting from where we are to something that we want to inspire people with? And that is important, because people do also have to be inspired by a vision. And so if you just tell them, look, if you organize and you do stuff around your wages, like, you're just improving your own class position, so you should be poor, and like, that's not going to work either, right? And so there has to be some kind of way that we talk about, think about, imagine. And I mean, some of this does come to a real head around climate, around genocide, right? Of like, some people saying, oh, I'm actually not okay with this, and then other people saying, related to climate in particular, that, yeah, I care about having a livable planet. I care about my own children, which then does bring it back into that personal level for people, that is like, oh, well, like, if I don't do something. But anyway, yeah, so those are the contradictions. I think those are important ones.
Yeah, no, I agree.
The social democrats and stuff like that, they're just not, that Democrat. I don't see there's no interest in grappling with that kind of stuff at all that I have experienced.
No, yeah. I mean, they'll use the buzzwords and that's about it. That's as far as they'll go, for sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, we've almost hit 3 hours, so we probably should start to wind it down.
To wrap up. Yeah.
What's this? How about Joseph Kilshore or AOC as candidates? Would they be anti-imperialism? I don't know who Joseph Kilshore is. Maybe you do, but AOC is absolutely not anti-imperialist at all. Like, she's said so many pro-imperialist statements over the years. She demonizes countries facing U.S. imperialism all the time, even when it's not necessary at all. Like, it wouldn't affect. Like, she goes out of her way, right, to be like, fuck Venezuela, fuck Cuba. She's just not. Yeah, she's an imperialist. She's in there.
100%. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think her little tour that she did and on the international circuit kind of highlighted that. Literally, talk shit on Trump for not getting the job done in Venezuela. She's like, Maduro's government is still intact. It's like, all right, cool, bro. You would have done a better job. And you're right. And that's the thing. Like, And when we see Kash Patel, heading the FBI, and the fact that he's drunk all the time, the fact that he's forgetting his password, good. It's not like they were going to be catching actual fucking like threats like pedophiles or things like that. Like it wasn't like they were going to be focused on that, because they are that. That's who's heading the government. So liberals want a more effective government that's going to result in our oppression, because it's not a government for the working class, the proletariat. It's a government for the capitalists. So that's what they're advocating for. That's what they want. That's why they hate Donald Trump, because it demonstrates that this buffoon can run this death machine to his own benefit instead of the benefit of the capitalist class, and keeping and maintaining the glamour that somehow this place can be reformed. Right? He's revealing the truth a little too much. I will ask though, if we could look at that bad Hasbro clip just briefly, only because they had somebody on who I think is a fucking badass, and so I do want to highlight how these are liberal Zionists through and through. It's the one with that Gabor Mate. Like if I followed your work and I find out that you're like a Zionist, it becomes personal, So just a little context
about it, and I think I took it well.
So this is Matt Lieb, who is a comic here to the far left, and he was, the most that he had done is a podcast on The Sopranos, right? So I'm sure him and Little Bill could get together and talk about that. But other than that, he never really showed any type of political engagement. He is married to Francesca Fiorentini, who has done work with MSNBC, who does work with The Majority Report, who blocked me, which is hilarious, for calling out her liberal Zionist normalization. Credit to Matt Lee for not blocking me yet, despite providing clips like this to highlight that these people are directly benefiting. Both Matt Lieb and Daniel Mate, both Jewish, are directly financially benefiting and boosting their careers by claiming that they're combating Zionist propaganda while normalizing it. So, or at least normalizing liberal Zionists. So again, literally profiting off the genocide and colonization of Palestinians in Palestine. In the middle is Daniel Mate, the failed son of Gabor Mate and the brother of Aaron Mate, who we just saw. These people get more and more pathetic the more you learn about them, but it's unsurprising that they are prominent figures. And of course, Gabor Mate, who supports the Nakba. And the context of this is that Daniel Mate is a musician, as you can tell from the cool badass guitar in the background, and he made a parody song, a parody of the national anthem of the Zionist entity, right? Because that's how they resist. That's how they show their fighting spirit, is by making parody songs. And apparently Gabor Mate, his father, was offended by this parody song, and here's why.
But I during the course of that, I invited you to come on the show. Well, we knew you were coming on, but we could discuss it as part of this, because it is a question for me of, is there such a thing as going too far? Or, what is that line between something and something else? Anyway, why don't you tell me how you felt about that and why, and if you still feel that way, and we can have a conversation about it.
Well, look, Techno Festival in the desert is where a lot of people were killed on October 7th. And I get it. After I talked to you, I actually thought that's what you were referring to, but turns out that you weren't. You were talking more about how the Israelis kind of revel in this. But I still think it was an unfortunate line and highly insensitive, because people were killed. And innocents were killed, and however, and it's not that Hamas could have planned to do that. How the hell did they know that there's going to be a techno festival that day? But they chanced upon it, whether it was Hamas or other Palestinians, and they killed innocent people. And so to
to make a joke about that, I think, is in bad taste, and it does. It's not a good look. First of all, I think it's insensitive and kind of cold.
I can't believe you just used the phrase "not a good look." That's such a contemporary internet generated.
Well, I may be old,
phraseology. I love it.
Well, I may be old, but I'm not totally dead yet.
Yeah, that's right.
But
it's probably from your kids texting you about 100 times a year, being like, "Dad, that's not a good look."
Yeah.
So, but quite apart from not being it's not a good look. But quite apart from that, it's insensitive and I think mean-spirited. I still think so, and I wish you would drop it. Now, I don't mind you satirizing Hatikva. I've always said for a long time now that the Israelis stole the land from the Palestinians, the national anthem from the Czechs.
Yes.
Because the tune
melody
comes from Smetana's Moldau.
That's right.
And the national dance from the Romanians, which is the hora. So I don't mind you guys.
And the food from the Arabs.
And the food from the Arabs, absolutely, the hummus from the Arabs. Do you condemn hummus, by the way?
Yes, of course we do.
I think you said that before.
Oh, we definitely have.
But I think that line, in the context of October 7th, was insensitive, and I didn't like it. I don't like it now, even if there's a better explanation for it.
Yeah. Well, so I just need to cop to something, or at least clarify. Yeah. It's not that I exclusively meant it that way, and when I wrote it, it immediately had a much bigger meaning.
Yeah.
But it's not that I didn't mean it that way either.
Okay.
So you're going to cop to it. You're going to say, and partially that you were thinking
it was not lost on me at all.
Oh, I see. So the double 100%. Meaning
it wasn't just unintentional, but the intention was broader.
Right.
And at the time, I said to myself, you know what, this broader, because you asked earlier, Dad, what are we supposed to do with, these horrors and how there's another face to it too. The ugliness. I have never seen a society so ugly and reprehensible and just downright toxic in my lifetime, at least. An entire society. It's a tiny country that's completely rotted its culture. Genocide is a mainstream I'm not justifying anything. I'm just explaining my emotional,
I get it.
Starting block. Norman Finkelstein talks about how it's not a state the genocide is not a state project anymore. It's a national project, and that's true. And then hold on, this is my turn. So and then you have the I don't do that with other guests, Matt, if you've noticed.
Yeah. No, you just steamroll them and then they stop talking.
Yeah, that's right.
Just kidding.
A lot of us YouTube comment. But
you said stop it.
Yeah, it's just even finding this clip was really difficult because between the conversations or bringing up the subject, they go on like 10 different random tangents, which I've never done before ever in any stream. However, it's just really annoying because it's like, again, the insidious nature of liberal Zionism is, oh, no. Well, I didn't specifically write that song mocking the ravers that got on October 7th, but broadly speaking, I guess you could kind of sort of include them in there. But yeah, that doesn't mean that I'm promoting or justifying what they experienced and what they went through, but like the double speak and the consistent walking shit back while trying to appear safe, edgy, and then you have Gabriel Maté literally like calling these colonizers innocent, and then doing this weird thing where it's like, well, Hamas and Palestinians, they couldn't have planned for that. Like, if it was up to them, they wouldn't have heard one innocent Israeli colonizer, all these things, to where it starts becoming this kind of weird, noble savage depiction that is still a caricature of what Palestinians and resistance fighters are. Like, okay, so colonizers got on October 7th. Why is that something to be remorseful about or to hesitate celebrating or mocking? And again, once called out or once given any form of pressure, you see that immediately walk back of like that parroting a song is like, oh, trying to justify why it's okay, but also saying, oh, but I'll be edgy about it. These people are comical. And of course, you see the reference to Norm Finkelstein. because you have 3 Jewish people there, 3 Euro-American Jews, and of course it got to reference another Euro-American Jew in North Finkelstein. And the reason why I really wanted to highlight that, because I can't stand Bad Hasbro, because I think they're legit like one of the main profiteers from this genocide in terms of like independent media. They just had like 8 days ago Susan Abuhawa, who, you know, is such a fucking badass, like just amazing. We covered her reaction to Mamdani basically disavowing her, and we read you know, that short story, A Trail of Soap. Bro, I was fucking crying, man. I don't know if you had the chance to read it yet, but I have. You know, when something it gets talked about like that.
No,
like,
but I know Susan. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I saw the video. Yeah.
Yeah, when something like that, you know, gets talked about, like, I want to know what the issue is. Like, what is it, right? And man, like, I was struggling to get through it because it's such a just tragic depiction of simply trying to use soap while in a concentration camp, while in these refugee camps and surviving genocide. And it's something so simple as washing your hands after using the bathroom. It becomes an odyssey, this tragic trek for this little girl. And that is what Mamdani denounced. That is what Suzanne was getting villainized for. And that's mainly rooted, at least in these media spaces, in liberal Zionist normalization. And so I don't think whether it's her or Muhammad al-Kurd, who wrote Perfect Victims, an amazing book, I don't think or hope that they really haven't watched too much about Hasbro, or maybe they don't know a lot about their guest. Because once you do, and once you start looking into Matt Lieb and Daniel Mattei and their connections and their consistent platforming and normalizing of liberal Zionists, then you realize that, like, these people are opportunists that should be called out. And so that's honestly what bothers me the most right now, is the fact that good principled people are giving them legitimacy, when at the end of the day, these are Euro-American Jews profiting off of the colonization and genocide of Palestine and Palestinians. And they don't call for decolonization. At best, they'll do the whole, oh, well, no state has the right to exist bullshit. And that's as far as they'll go. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's another that's the only clip I've ever seen of theirs, but I do know that they're a big, you know, they've become quite a big platform. So, you know, I don't have enough track record of looking at their work to really make, like, you know, a kind of analysis of it. But I do think I totally agree with the point that you're talking about in terms of this, you know, the normalization of liberal Zionism. And, you know, that was also something that, you know, we did talk yesterday too about with Adam, is just kind of like that, you know, they just become these different ways to talk about something. It's like, it's a narrative strategy, right? And it's a way to talk about something that doesn't exist, basically. And, you know, until we're reckoning with, like, what is post-Zionist Palestine, right? Like, then, you know, what are we talking about? Like, you know, what are we defending? And, you know, like, among Jewish people, I imagine that this conversation and these discussions are complicated in all kinds of ways within, you know, just based off of their families, the institutions that they participate in, everything. Like, you're getting forms of Zionist propaganda in all kinds of ways constantly, right? And so I do think it's a reason why to go back to that comparison between, like, should Tim Wise be the spokesperson for the Black Panther Party, right? Because that's Norm Finkelstein, you know, in a nutshell. You know, is that, you know, yeah, white people, there's all kinds of reasons why white people are not the best spokespeople for Black folks. Like, I don't think this is a very complicated thing. One layer of nuance I would add to it, though, is that I don't think, this is my position, I don't necessarily think that all of these projects with their own contradictions are all in vain or all have that they can't play some overarching role in how different folks circulate within these spheres. I mean, I realize I'm using I sound fucking postmodernist right now, which is not what I want to do. But what I'm saying is that there are contradictions with it. Yeah, there are contradictions within every community, right? And so oppressor communities and oppressed communities, there are always a broad array of contradictions. And I don't think those contradictions are meaningless, even if they are not liberatory at the same time either, And so in that sense, I don't know enough about the platform or enough about how Mohammed Al-Kurd or Susan Al-Bahaba would make their decisions. A lot of people approach spaces. I think I could share this. So Dylan Rodriguez is a friend of mine, right? And I won't say what it was or whatever, but what's that?
He's a badass, man.
He is, yeah. But like, Dylan will go into any, like, if AIPAC invited Dylan to it, I'm not sure that he would say no, right? Because he might take the posture and right, wrong, or indifferent, and he's open to conversation about it. Actually, is something I think, I'm going to have him on, and maybe Lara Shihai and maybe some other people will do like a conversation about this discussion. Like, he would say, look, put me in that space and I will try to eviscerate it, and I will try to reveal every, issue and contradiction and like come at me,
Yeah.
And so like, I've had people reach out to me and say, hey, Dylan's doing this event, and I'm not going to say what it was or whatever. Mm-hmm. And they were like, is he aware that this is counter, the event that he's participating in is a counterinsurgent force, essentially.
Right.
And I said, I don't know. I haven't talked to him about it. I'm happy to, if you want to give me resources to pass on to him so that he's aware of all the contradictions that you would want him to be aware of, I will. But, and I did. And he was like, fuck yeah, thank you for sending me this. Like, I'm ready to go, into this play. But his whole mentality to it is essentially, and this is a complicated thing on platforms sometimes, especially on YouTube, right? Because I think we can engage these things in a certain way of, by engaging with these people, you are talking to them. And obviously in that case, I mean, it's a father and a son and all that. Like, in that particular example, they are like, having conversation with each other. But like, there is the audience factor, and I think for Dylan, and this gets back to the Boots Riley argument to some extent too, for Dylan, he would say, I think I can radicalize, 30 people in that room that might be ready to storm out or start an insurrection in the place or something else. And like, we can have a critical discussion around that and say, I think actually what you're doing is the opposite. You're making that place seem to people who are in it like it's a more radical space than it actually is. You're giving false, it's like a form of like false revolutionary consciousness or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. So all of that to just say is, I just think that the questions around platforming and what platform to go on and whatnot, that there's more context and stuff to think through sometimes than just like, I want to give these people my my badge of approval,
right?
And one quick example. I've had people come to me about folks that I've platformed before, for sure, like many times, and from various different angles. And you hear a lot, and some of the argument is tricky, right? Because there's always a question, I think, within some of those decisions, as like, who's benefiting most? Right. What's and that gets into a tricky area, and some of it has to do with like, how good is the person at getting across their message, and is that the message that you want to have got across too? But anyways, I do want to have a more, and maybe, I'll talk to Lara. Maybe you could join us for that too. It would be very interesting to have a bigger conversation around platforming and going on platforms, and what does that mean?
I'm a huge fan of Lara and her work. Is just, man, like, I don't even know where to start, but that would be awesome. I would love that. I would really appreciate that. So I think the issue here, and so I started looking at the chat, which was my bad. What I do is call out liberal Zionist propagandists. What I do is call out counterinsurgent propagandists. That is my role. I'm not an academic. I'm not a professional. I'm not an intellectual to that regard. All these things. My role is, hey, like I said, I'll take out the trash. I see some bullshit. I'm going to call it out. I'm not judging or criticizing Susan or Mohammed Al-Kurd for going on these platforms. If anything, I hold myself accountable for not doing the work well enough to make sure that people are aware that this is a liberal Zionist normalizing space, profiting off the colonization, genocide of Palestinians. That's what they're doing. I just checked their Patreon. They're making $10,300 a month, right? $10,000 a month, and they're not calling for decolonization. I see somebody in the chat, I think it's like CW or something like that, saying, "Oh, they want a one-state solution." Bro, that's a liberal fucking position. That's a liberal position. That means nothing to me, right? You hear Emma Vigeland, who was on Bad Hasbro, who's best friends with Matt Leave's wife, Francesca Fiorentini, who was calling for a one-state solution where Palestinians are assimilated into the Zionist project, because that's what she's seen here, and that's what she thinks works. Oh, well, yeah, sure, we colonized the indigenous people and they took over the land, but we included them as Americans to a certain extent, but we recognize their sovereignty within the greater context. And it's like they want to take the Zionist project to a liberal down the liberal road that reflects what they're used to and what they normalize as progress, which is the U.S. settler colonial project. That's what they want. That's what they advocate for. So this idea that a one-state solution somehow means that you support Palestinians is, again, what liberal Zionists push in order to save the Zionist project, to maintain it. Sure, it's going to evolve and change, but it's still going to exist. And more importantly, colonizers will still control and remain on Palestinian land. What they want is they want to see South Africa and Palestine. That's what makes them safe and comfortable. And that's what we need to oppose. So if it makes people uncomfortable or annoys people that I'm calling this out, good, because you should have higher standards and you should be more critical of the insidious nature of liberal Zionist propaganda, because it evolves as the average Zionist or the rabid reactionist Zionist makes too much noise, is calling for genocide and talking about Amalek. The liberal Zionist has to adjust their approach, and that's why Peter Beinart, Sam Cedar, these individuals adjust their approach, Bad Hasbro included, to appear like the rational actors that you can trust and align with. But are your goals the same in terms of decolonization? No.
100%. But the one thing I would say in terms of just to give context to it as a platform decision, say for, and I know you're not critiquing Susan and Muhammad, and you made that clear, but like, just, they also go on a lot of, like, they'll go on mainstream platforms.
Yeah.
And so like,
the mainstream isn't advertising themselves as combating Hasbara. That's the issue, is like how these people present themselves. You know, the characters that they play are meant to misguide you. It's meant to, you know, to create this trust that they're going to tell you the truth and that they're actually anti-Zionist when they're not. That's my issue. That's why this is different. That's why this is distinct.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, you know, but anyway, we've made our points. I'll let it be.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I think it's the only time I interrupted you, or maybe twice, but yeah.
No. You're fine. You're fine. Of course. You know, it's just been good, man. I appreciate it. It was good to talk to you for all of this. Shout out to all the folks in the chat for keeping it going. Trying to see if there's anything that I started some stuff, but I think we've talked out a lot of the different things. Yeah, so we didn't get to Rock Hill. We thought we were talking about some aspects of that, but maybe next time. I don't know whether Boots has ever apologized, or if even, you know, how he feels about those statements. I haven't seen that posed to him in a space where he's responded to that. So I mean, I one point that was made, which I think, I don't know the answer to this. I don't know whether that is what he believes, or if that is what he felt like he needed to say because his work is produced by Zionists. And so this is what he was trying to navigate. And I think that question is important because it relates to the question of, you know, what influence does this have? How do the principles that you speak about as somebody who advocates and speaks in a principled manner about things, are these compromised by this, or is that your stance? And to be clear, like, I don't agree with either one of those things, and there are also plenty of people, you know, whether Samantha or Mtume or others, you know, I think Saul Williams in many respects, who have also said, look, like, if that's what you're going to demand me to do to stay in these spaces, then I'm not doing it. And you can either decide that I can't be here, or you can decide that I can be, but I'm not going to stop doing what I'm doing and saying what I'm saying. And, you know, that's a sacrifice. And so I appreciate people who are willing to sacrifice around those kind of questions. But that's I don't know the answer to the question that was posed in full.
I mean, this whole thing of sacrifice is I think, especially being in the belly of the beast, is a little, I don't know, like cosplaying or LARPing in a sense, because, you know, I hear that Norm Finkelstein sacrificed a lot for his solidarity with Palestinians. I'm like, what did he sacrifice? Tenure. Gasp. Right? Meanwhile, if we're talking about people who, like you mentioned earlier, Ghassan Kanafani, it's like he was assassinated by the Zionist entity, because that's how much of a threat his organizing and writing and his work and his analysis was. Norm Finkelstein gets banned from entering the Zionist project, and he immediately goes, I'm not an enemy of Israel. I'm not an enemy of Israel. But you know, so I don't know, the term sacrifice. But yeah.
All right, man.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Appreciation, everybody. Have a good one.